if you miss this, give me 10 push-ups. Can you do that? Is that like a thing? So he was let go. And I
Right.
think we put together a budget that was going to be like $100,000, which to us was like, we'd never be able to get our hands on that. And he was like, that's it?
Like
Oh,
living the dream, just going on tour. And you did that for 10 to 15 years?
yeah. That after all the expenses, the business would profit $500 a month. And we thought that was amazing. And he looked at this and he's like, yeah, let's do it. And right joining walls was a adult bookstore.
You opened this music school right next to a sex shop.
Yes, this is not sustainable.
It was a concern. It was an issue. You didn't just grow by hundreds of students, in like a month or two, or you guys worked.
I mean, we're looking for the tens. We cannot hire anyone unless we've got 3 references back.
Are they excited about having this program in their school?
Yeah.
What advice would you give to studio owners that are maybe thinking of bringing art into their school? There's that point of break even. Was there ever a point where you were concerned or worried? Benjie Kushins, welcome to the show. So glad to have you here, my friend.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We've known each other for about a year now, and I've done some work with you in the Build a Music School program, which is a fantastic program. You're a business coach, and I've just been so impressed with hearing your story, and I'm excited to hear more about it today. But you co-founded and direct Art and Soul School of Creative and Performing Arts in Santa Rosa, California, operating for 2 decades
Yeah.
with programs in art, music, and dance. You scaled from a solo teacher to over 700 students. And plus, you've got a staff of over 60 working for you. So you are definitely walking the talk. You're a Berklee College of Music alum, a professional percussionist. You grew up the art and soul while partnering with local public schools. So that's an interesting thing to take away. I'm excited to hear more about that. But you also had to navigate some pretty tough challenges. So you've had wildfires, you've had earthquakes, and of course the pandemic. You did all that without shutting down. You pivoted to Zoom within a week. You delivered art supplies to families. You put all of these studio safety measures in place. So lots of cool stories there I want to hear about. You co-founded the Art Fundamentals, a licensed K through 8 art curriculum, and this is for studios. So like studios that can license this program from you. You're already doing this around the U.S. and talking to others around the world. You launched and expanded Art and Soul with the help from a Hebrew free loan. So, in education and startup expansion funding, you were later profiled for paying it forward. And like I mentioned, you're a business coach. So, you're very active in this industry. And again, Benji, this is why I wanted to have you on because you contribute so much to our industry. So, I'm excited to chat with you today. So,
Awesome.
yeah, yeah. But take us back a little bit. So, like, how did you where did you grow up in California? Like, is Santa Rosa like your
Grew up
is that your home?
Yeah, I grew up in California about an hour and a half from Santa Rosa. So Santa Rosa's wine country, so about an hour north of San Francisco. And I grew up in the East Bay, which is about half hour or so east of San Francisco. Yeah, kind of like the
Okay.
suburbs out there.
Like, was it a musical family? Was music in your blood from the beginning, or
Yeah, it was. My mom was a piano teacher, and so she had a baby grand piano in our living room, and she had students that would come and take lessons from her, and so there was always music going on. I remember I can't remember what age, probably around 10 or 11. My mom said, "Do you want?" I was interested in music, and my mom said, "Great, let's take some piano lessons. I'll be your teacher." And I was like, "Great." So we sit down, we have our first lesson, it goes great. And then she says, "Great, here's what you're going to practice for the next week. And then we'll meet again because we want to keep like a regular schedule, like a normal student. We'll meet again next week and we'll go over it." So the week goes by. I don't practice like a lot of students. We sit down at the piano. My mom says, "So did you practice?" And I said, "Of course I did." And we have a baby grand piano in our living room. My mom teaches lessons and is a stay-home mom. So like she knew that I didn't practice because there was no other playing going on. So she said, "No, you didn't," and that was the end of our lessons. So I learned quickly that you got to practice. Can't lie to your parents. Also, um, yeah. So that was kind of music in my family, and I also had my a lot of other musical talent outside of kind of some cousins. My mom's cousin was a New York concertmaster for the New York Philharmonic, and so we would go see him play. He traveled all over the world, but he was prodigy. He kind of grew up with my mom as he would travel around and take lessons with really famous musicians and teachers. And so he was in LA. He'd come up to San Francisco and stay with my mom when she was growing up. She's also a singer, so she would sing and play piano, and he'd play violin together. And then at like 18 or 19, he became the concertmaster of the Philharmonic and did it for 40 or 50 years. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Really cool guy. So that was kind of neat. So I got to see him a lot and kind of watch that, transpire. So there was definitely a lot of music in our house. My dad, tone deaf, did not get anything from musical from that side. But yeah, it was, there's a lot of music in our, growing up.
In your that's so cool because your mom sorta had that entrepreneurial spirit, it sounds like, staying home, but bringing in some income, teaching out of the house. Did you, I mean, obviously, you were inspired by her in some form, even though the piano thing didn't quite work out,
Yeah.
but where did percussion enter into the picture for you?
Um, you know, Percussion was kind of random for me. So after that experience, I was still interested in music, but maybe I was a little younger. I'd say maybe that was like 7 or 8, but I just hadn't found my way yet. And then in fourth grade, if you joined the band, you could get out of like math or PE or something, right? Like once a week, you could skip a class if you did band. So my friends and I got together, like, hey, let's join the band. We don't want to do this other, we don't want to do PE. Let's do this. And so I just happened to pick drums. It's so funny. I can't remember if there wasn't like a pull or a draw to it. I just thought, oh, this looks fun. And so jumped into that. And my, other friends did trumpet and trombone and clarinet, and I was kind of the only one that did drums. But then just quickly like fell in love with it. I was like, oh, this is cool. There's so many different, you're playing snare drum on one piece and bass drum on another, and xylophone and timpani and all these cool things, just in a elementary school concert band. And so then I did drums from fourth grade all the way through 12th grade in public schools in California. And every single year I had a different band director. So I either moved from one school, from elementary school to middle school to high school, or in high school, all 4 years, we went through band directors. They were, either one retired, or I think one retired. One was, um, one was let go. It was a little bit of an old school, you miss this, give me 10 push-ups, kind of thing. So he was let go. But yeah, I kind of noticed, I fell in love with it and all that. But I also noticed, wow, teaching is not a very steady gig in the public schools. So that definitely kind of imprinted me early on more than I thought.
Was there a teacher like, was one of those teachers more impactful to you or formative, like, helped kinda shape your perspective, moving forward in your life, or was it just the fact that percussion was just super cool and you loved it?
Yeah, I think probably the latter. Because they turned over so quickly, I didn't get to
Yeah.
connect as much to them. I did also take private lessons, and my private lesson instructor was great, and I had him 5 or 6 years. So, he really encouraged me. Um, I didn't even know, the interesting thing is I didn't know you could major in music in college until probably my junior year of high school. I just thought if you were a musician and you were going to like go out and tour, which is what I wanted to do, and perform, you just did that, right?
Mhm.
You were talented enough to like join a band or do your own thing and go out and do that. If you want to be a music teacher, then of course, you got to go to college and get your music ed degree and all that stuff. But um, we had a music teacher who was marched with there's an organization called the Blue Devils, right? Like drum and bugle corps all over the US. And so the Blue Devils was from Concord, California, where I grew up. And so marching band was big. I never joined them, but had a lot of friends that were in there, and drum corps kind of stuff. And so their instructors would come to our high school and help us out. And so I remember the end of my junior year, one of the instructors like, "Oh yeah, if you wanna, you're good. If you want to major in music, I went to school here, and you should, check that out. And they have a good music department." And and I was kind of like, "Oh, I didn't, end of junior years when you start, your parents like, where do you want to go to college? We got to go take college tours and look. And what do you want to do?" And I was like, "Well, I just want to play music. Can you do that? Is that like a thing in college?" I genuinely didn't know. So then, then once I opened my eyes to it, it's like, oh, now I want to see where I want to go, to do that stuff. But it was definitely interesting. I don't think there was one person. I think I just fell in love with it. Yeah.
Like, how did your parents respond to that when you, uh, like, were really wanting to do music and kinda leaning in that direction? Did they encourage that, or, how was that?
So, um, interesting question. So, I would say it was split. So what happened was when this was something I really wanted to do, I remember my parents sat down with me, and my dad is much more, my mom is more like me, like the artist type, the dreamer, let's not worry about budgets. Let's just do what our hearts tell us to do,
Right,
and my
yeah.
dad is the sit down logical one of, okay, that's great and we love you, but how are you going to make a living? Kind of thing.
Yep.
And so his concern was that is, my son can be able to make a living doing this. He had seen firsthand of, like, even if you want to teach, you had a different teacher for the last 8 years. How is that even stable? And he's an educator. He was a teacher and principal and vice principal and dean of curriculum for the 40 some odd years. And
Wow.
so what we decided to do was, the instructor that I mentioned that had said where they went to college, they actually went to Cal State Northridge down in LA. And so my dad had said, "Hey, I know you want to do music. Would you be open to going to like a state or a UC college where you could at least, see some other things that were going on to make sure that's what you wanted to do? Because if you just go to a music college, you won't be exposed to any of these other things. And, who knows what you might miss." So I was open to that, and so I went and toured a bunch of schools. I found an instructor in Northridge that I really connected with, and so I actually went there for a year, just to kind of prove to myself and a little bit of prove to my parents, but kind of, it was an agreement we came up with, but kind of prove to myself, like, okay, I also need to make sure I can hang. Like, I thought I was pretty good in high school, but you're a big fish in a little pond, kind of thing. And so now when you go out into the world, it's like, oh, there's a lot of good musicians out there, like,
Yeah,
right, it's
yeah.
not just you. And so met a group of percussionists at Cal State Northridge that were phenomenal and super supportive, and did really well there, and just got the bug even more. And so I was like, I really want to do music. This is what I want to do. And my dream was Berklee College of Music, and I needed some loans. You talked about a loan I took out, and we talk about that later on too, because I took that out a few times. And one was to get into college, to get into Berkeley, because it
Mm.
was so expensive. And so that's kind of my journey, through that. I did have one instructor in college that really did shape me. His name was Jerry Steinholtz. He's actually passed away, but he worked for uh, I don't even know who he worked for. It's so funny. He was he's this larger guy, and he'd walk down the hall, and he would pull out these drummers and sit down and have these lessons with them. But they would do percussion. They didn't do like drum set or timpani. They did more Latin percussion, congas and bongos and timbales. And so I asked one of the older, students. I was like, who is this guy that I see walking down the hallway? Is he a professor? I'd like to take lessons. And nobody can answer me. They're like, "Well, he doesn't work for the college, but he's here, but you can pay him to take lessons if you want." And so everybody had nothing but amazing things to say about him. So I said, "Great." So I approached him. I said, "Hey, I've heard great things. I'd like to take lessons with you. How much does it cost?" And it was a very, I won't even, I can't remember the number, but it was like $342.68. And like that was the price. And I was like, "Is that per like semester?" He's like, "No, that's just the price." So if you were there for a year or 4 years, like that, you just paid that. It was just your like commitment to, I want to do this. And
Huh.
so then you would have a lesson, and he was probably the most direct teacher that I ever had in my life. If you walked in, almost, now that I say this out loud, almost reminded me of my mom in that first lesson. I'd actually
Mm.
connected those two. Interesting is you would go into a lesson, and he didn't ask you if you practiced, but as a teacher, right? If your students practice or
Right.
not. And
Yeah.
so if he hadn't if I hadn't practiced, which happened once, um, he was just like, "Yeah, I'll see you next time." And, it wasn't a shame.
No lesson.
There's just no lesson, like, we're just done. And it wasn't a 4 o'clock every Thursday, like you get when enroll in a university. If you're a music major, you get private lessons as, part of your major, that kind of thing, and very structured. This wasn't it. This was just the lessons sometimes were 20 minutes. They sometimes were an hour and a half. Like it was very unstructured. Again, I still have no idea how he was associated with the college at all. But he really shaped. He took me from wanting to be a drummer to be like a percussionist, and that was kind of a. It put me in my own category of, oh, there's a ton of percussionists. When I got to Berkeley, there were, I want to say, 2,500 students. 700 of them were drum set, majors, drummers, and there were four of us that were percussionists, and it was a new major at the time, or a new um, principal instrument that you could do. And so that really allowed me to play with some really top notch people because I wasn't competing against the 600 or 700 other drum set players. Any bands, big band, rock band, Latin band that wanted a percussionist, right, separate than a drum set player, there were four of us, to pick from. So I was like, great, this is, huge opportunity. And I loved, all the just different instruments, the different cultures. And yeah, so I would say Jerry was probably one instructor that really influenced me and wasn't even one of my like teachers I was supposed to have, I guess.
So I mean, aside from his obvious, very flexible approach to teaching without the structure, and that drew you in to some level. What do you feel like what was it about his teaching that made you that just changed you in that way? Like that was so pivotal for you? What would you say he did in the lessons? So when you did practice and there was a lesson,
Mhm.
like in those lessons, what was he doing, do you feel like, that just really inspired you?
I think it was I think it was his honesty. Right? As a
Mm.
teacher, I think, it's harder to do with a 7 or 8-year-old as a teacher, right? To say like, "Hey, you're not doing well, come back next week." Like, you're not gonna say that, when you're teaching a 7 or 8-year-old or a beginner. But as a college student, when you go in there, especially your first year as a college student, like, you're well, my daughter's in her first couple of years of college, and we call it adulting light. So she's adulting, but not
Yeah.
totally adulting, right? So,
Right,
your
right.
first year of college, you're doing some things as an adult, but you're also like still kind of a kid. You're learning, and when you get challenged in those ways, where Jerry was just like, you didn't practice, or you need to work on this more, and it wasn't mean in any way. It wasn't, again, didn't make you feel guilty. It just put the onus on you of like, hey, if you want to get to this level, you got to step up. And conversely, when you would play something and you both would like, a lot of times we'd play together, right? So we'd play together in a lesson, and we would come to the end of the pattern or the song or whatever it was, and he'd turn you and just go, "Oh yeah, you got it." That just meant so much more because you knew if you didn't get it, he was going to tell you, right? He didn't sugarcoat anything. So I think that honesty of calling you out, right, when you weren't doing what you should be doing, or rising to your level, um, conversed with, like, but really congratulating you, and saying, hey, that sounded great. Yeah, it was really rewarding. I think the other teachers just kind of, they challenged you, but it wasn't as blunt, it wasn't as honest. You felt like they were teachers and professors, and you were a student, and they're trying to help you, pass the class, whatever it was. But he really took the time to know you, and that casualness of just like, hey, you ready? Let's jump in. Let's go. It wasn't. It was. I'm not this. I'm not a big structure person, so I also really connected with the, hey, I'm ready. Let's go. And sometimes it was twice a week. Sometimes, hey, I've been shedding all week. Since our lesson on Monday, can we jump into another one? Or just saying, hey, it's been super busy. There's been finals. I might not see you for 2 or 3 weeks. As opposed to like you just have to show up every week, which has its value too. But I think this one was different than anything else I'd done before. So maybe that's what connected me the most.
Yeah. That's that's it's interesting to really boil down what the essence of it was, right? Like, I mean, I was just thinking about some of my most influential teachers, and that's true. They really had that blunt honesty, but it wasn't coming from a place, because I feel like some teachers are just mean, right? Like they're just mean, and it's almost like that's a strategy in and of itself. Just be mean, and don't say anything good or anything until there's actually um it's perfect or whatever. But like that's almost an approach that some teachers take.
Mm,
And obviously that's way too far, being cruel to kids.
yeah,
But also there's the flattery that just it's like, well, I don't want to hurt their feelings. I don't want them to feel bad about themselves because then they'll quit, or they'll get discouraged and they'll stop. And so there is, I mean, it's not like just quite so easy to figure out exactly how to do that. Um, but this, because I was just thinking about that too. Like for me, it was piano, and I had this piano teacher. She was so good at that. She obviously cared about me, and I think that was really the big difference. She was willing to be honest with me and be blunt, but I knew that she cared about me as a person, like outside of lessons completely. She actually
yeah,
cared about me, and so she genuinely wanted to see me improve. And I think that that's a really important piece to put in there,
yeah.
the approach can, and people are different. Obviously, they have different learning styles, but I just find that really interesting, that brutal honesty,
That might
and being willing to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, that again, it's yeah, this is cool for me to like look back and reflect on those in a different light. That might have, what you said was that might have been probably the first time that I might have had that. Again, been having so many different band teachers, change over. I never really got to connect, with them, and then having even my private lesson instructor who I really enjoyed. I still look back and I was like, okay, but it's kind of your traditional lesson. Like you walk in, I mean, it was a tiny closet in the back of a music retail studio. He had to go in the room first because there were two drum sets, and you can't get by somebody if they're sitting at the second drum set, like tiny, and two practice pad, drum sets. And but it was like, you go in and the other student is just coming out, and then you go in and your half hour's up, and then you leave and the next student comes in. It's your traditional music lesson, Sarah, what we do. But and he was a good instructor, and I know that he liked me, but yeah, but Jerry in that lesson was more, yeah, getting to know you and connecting. And when you're walking down the hallway, hey Benji, how's it going, and how you working on, we'll get together soon. It was more of a friendship and mentorship as opposed to a structured show up here because this is what you're paying for and these are your lessons. And again, it was kind of that adulting light of, hey, I've paid my money, whatever, $362 and whatever it was, this random number. Um, so you also felt like, okay, this is also on me to like reach out to make sure I'm getting my lesson, and when I'm prepared, I want to go back out. Because again, it wasn't like we're just going to meet every Tuesday at 2 o'clock. That wasn't set. It was the only thing that wasn't structured. Because in college, you've got all your classes, you got to be there or not be there, whatever it is. But you've got your schedule, and with him, it was, yeah, maybe I just kind of elevated myself to be like, oh, if I want to get to this level, I've got to make the effort. I can't just show up. I've got to make the effort to do the work and show up and ask for what I need, which is, hey, I'm ready for a lesson. I asked for it when I felt like I was ready. And so I think that all that kind of put together of taking a little bit more ownership, maybe of my education at that point. But it was a very unique experience that was, yeah, really very cool.
So you got through Berkeley,
Yeah.
and um and at like where did you like, was it just you were set on the path to do music and moving forward, or did you tour at all? What happened after you graduated?
Yeah, so when I was at Berkeley, a man, I gotta even get the connections. A good friend of mine who I grew up with, who actually later on wound up marrying my wife and I, his cousin was the manager of a band that was in Santa Rosa at the time, and their percussionist was leaving. And so he happened to mention, oh, you've met my friend Benji. He's at Berklee College of Music now, but he's usually home on the summers, and their percussionist was leaving during the summer, and maybe he'll want to play with you guys. And so I came out and met this band that were playing. They were playing in local shows and doing half covers and half originals. And I went up, met the guys, rehearsed for about 2 hours, and then did a gig like an hour later, and then totally fell in love with the vibe and the music. And so I would come back and play music with them in the summers. They started getting a little bit bigger and brought in another drummer when I was gone, so they could continue. And then my last year at Berkeley, their drummer quit. And so I said, "Hey, when I graduate, I want to. I know I always knew I wanted to come back to California, but I thought I'd probably be in LA just from the music scene." Um, but they said, "Hey, if you come back, let's keep doing this thing." So I came back and joined this band, um, and yeah, things started going well. And so we toured all over the West Coast. We recorded that we were um, playing a gig in St. Helena, which is also kind of in wine country, a small little town. Some guy walked by, was like, "This music's amazing. I want to support you guys." Turned out to be a millionaire hedge fund manager, who's like put a
Wow.
proposal together for, doing a demo. And so, and he goes, "I have all these investors and we'll invest." And so, we're in our early 20s. Some of the guys were a little bit older, so mid 20s maybe. And so we said, okay, we put together, musicians. So it's like, let's put together like this worldwide whatever and how much it would cost and something where it's like he would never be able, maybe he'd never be able to do it. And I think we put together a budget that was going to be like $100,000, right? Which to us was like, we'd never be able to get our hands on that.
Right,
So we
yeah.
have a meeting with him, never forget. And he was like, "That's it? Oh, I won't even do the investors. I'll just do it myself." And we were just like, "Are you kidding me right now?" So, yeah, so he put some so we went up to Canada. We went to Vancouver in Canada. We got this producer who did the song So You've Had a Bad Day. So you had a
Uh-huh.
bad day, right? So that was his hit. It had just been on all the I think they were on those shows where you like game shows where you get kicked off at the end. I can't remember
Oh,
what they
sure.
were, right? But that's how it became that song kind of caught on. They played that at the end when they kicked somebody off, one of the contestants off. So
Okay, yeah.
we interviewed a bunch of producers and found this guy and really liked him. So the band flew up for 3 or 4 weeks, and we recorded 3 songs of the demo. The investor, after about 2 weeks, sent our I was married at the time and had a daughter who was 2. The lead singer had 2 kids. So he's like, "Oh, I'm going to fly the wives and the girlfriends up." So the wives flew up and put us up in nice hotels and world class recording studio. It was amazing. So we did that. We got some radio play along California, and we toured California and a lot on the West Coast. We opened for a bunch of Train when they were just starting out, Goo Goo Dolls, I toured with them for a while, so it was fun. We had a blast, did it for 10, 15 years, and then
Wow.
and while I was doing that, was doing some side teaching, and I worked at a music studio, or a music retail shop, and so that was kind of my, tour on the weekends, rehearsing at night, and selling musical instruments and sheet music and doing some teaching during the day.
It's like living the dream, you know? A
Dream.
lot of people talk about, that just going on tour and having the band, and
Yeah.
you did that for 10 to 15 years?
Yeah. We did it for a long we did it for a long time.
And did that original investor, did he stay with you the whole time?
He didn't stay with us the whole time. We got to a point where he brought on somebody from, I think they were from EMI, and the band did not get along with this guy. He was a schmoozer and a sweet talker, but just full of crap in our opinion. But he really latched onto the investor because he had just left EMI and was trying to start his own thing. And he saw
Mm,
the money and wanted to bypass us and get to this guy. And so eventually that's what happened is we just went, "We can't work with this guy." And he's like, "Well, I'm gonna work with this guy." And so it went and I mean, he spent we made one of the 3 demos that we made, he made a video with Ice T, right? He brought in Ice T to be in this video, and I'm gonna forget the other guy's name, but he was the kid in one of the Terminator movies, like a young John, and was one of the Terminator Eddie somebody. I'm not gonna remember his name. Anyway,
I don't know.
spent like a couple $100,000 on this video that the band was not in, and it was all this conceptual stuff that was like, that's not really what the song's about. It was really weird, very weird. But instead of taking that money and putting it into like touring or promotion or marketing, it was like, we're gonna do this video, and this video is gonna take off, and it's gonna get millions of views, and it's huge. Um, and it just didn't really mesh with the vibe of the band. So we kind of went our separate ways, unfortunately. And the band kept going after that for a while. Um, but without that backing, it was hard to, hard to, and as we get older, when you get into like, now you're in your mid 30s, it's like, that's
Yeah.
not what people are looking for, anymore. And just harder, a bunch of us were married, had kids, and now it's harder to be away for 2 or 3 weeks, when you've got young kids.
So it's kinda like it sort of had its run,
Yeah.
and it was kinda winding down. So at this point, you had, you and Lauren were married at this point?
We were married at this point. Actually, it was before we got married, that I started my first studio. So I was teaching. um, I was working in a music retail shop, and in the back uh, they had music lesson rooms. And so, you'd come in to buy a trumpet and say, "Hey," front desk person, being me, I'd say, "Hey, are you interested in trumpet lessons? Because you just bought a trumpet. We have instructors in the back, and they're all like independent contractors. So, here's the guy, the trumpet teacher's card. Give him a call, and he'll give you the price and all that stuff." So I was teaching in the back of a studio, and the uh, music studio was going to close down. They were leasing a place, and the building management wanted to renovate the whole building and do office buildings. And so um, they didn't re-sign the lease, and so it was closing down. I had probably at the time not that many, maybe 20 students, and there was a guitar player in the room next to me, and he taught at like three different music studios, and he must have had like 60 students. He was teaching like 6 days a week. And so we just got to talking, and I was like, "Hey, what are you doing? Like, I've got 20 students. Like, a couple of them, I went to their homes, but I was like, I'm not doing that for 20 students." And he's like, "I'm not doing that either." And so we got to talking. He's like, "Well, what if we owned our own music studio? Like, how hard could that be?" Right? Was literally what we said. That can't be that hard. So we're like, "Yeah, let's do that." So we looked around for a place. And I found an old building, not a building, but it was in a shopping center. So it was a unit in a shopping center. It was an old Jenny Craig city. So it already had all these little meeting rooms. It had, I think, 5 or 6 meeting rooms, and then a little lobby. And I was like, this is perfect. Like, the meeting rooms are perfect size for music lessons, and we're just going to bring our students and go here. And so, but we had never, again, I was 23, 24, maybe.
Oh, so this was right after you started
This
with
is
the investor?
with the band, yeah. So I was doing both at the same
Wow.
time. And so, this was where you say kinda living the dream. This is where I was like, "Oh, yeah, this is it. Like, I'm gonna own my own business. I'm gonna teach
Yeah.
whatever I want. I'm touring, with this band. Like, I'm making a living doing music." Like, it was I actually remember the gig where it was my last day of working retail and literally working for somebody else, and thought, "Oh, I'm gonna work for myself now and just make a living." And that was, I said, I was 24, 25. I'm over 50. So that was 25 years ago. And I haven't
Yeah.
worked for anybody.
Wow.
Well, I work for my wife because we we own the company together, but I haven't worked for
Yeah.
anybody else in that time. So yeah, that was around that same time. So looked at that place. Never forget. We sat down with the landlord. I said, if you want to rent the place, you're a little bit on the younger side, but let's, come up with a business proposal, and let's sit down and talk about what that can look like. And so Robert was the name of my business partner. So we get together and we write this proposal. Um, and man, David, it was, I mean, if I was the owner, I would have just been like, "No, this will never work." Our business proposal was, the old studio that we used to work at, a lot of their a lot of their income was instrument rentals. And so I was like, "Oh, why don't we'll get some instruments and we'll rent those out, because that's good money that you don't have to do anything with once you rent them out." So we're like, "Okay, we're gonna rent out like 50 instruments." No idea where we were gonna get them, but that was in our budget, that we're gonna have 50 instruments at like $20 a month, right? To rent a trumpet or a saxophone or clarinet, whatever it is, for kids during the school year. So that was whatever that was. That's $1,000 a month, and then we're gonna, with our teaching, we're gonna do X, Y, and Z. Anyway, it came out that after all the expenses, and every instrument was rented and every music room was at capacity, the business would profit $500 a month. And we thought that was amazing. And not realizing like how long it would even take us to get to that point. And it was crazy. And he looked at this and he's like, yeah, let's do it. So I don't know if he was generous or crazy or whatever it was,
Or desperate.
or desperate. So yes, on that end, because it was the only unit that was empty. It had been empty for a while, and right joining walls was a adult bookstore. So it was a sex shop that was
Oh my
right next to
gosh.
us. So I desperate, I think, was definitely in there. Um and so we talked about that. It was frosted over on the windows. It wasn't anything that was too apparent, but um
So you opened this music school right next to a sex shop.
yes, we did. And uh the sex shop owner, his concern was that we were too loud because we put the drums on that side of the studio. And so we had said, hey, we'll try some insulation, but it might be loud. Like, we can only electronic drum sets were a thing back then, but they weren't very good. The response, and also, so it was, we had to figure some things out. And so they complained a good deal to the landlord, but the landlord, I think, wanted us in there and not them. So they moved
Sure.
out maybe. It was probably at least a year that they were in there, but we were concerned. But
Wow.
the place was perfect, right? The room's already set up. We didn't have to do any renovation. He gave us some money to like recarpet and repaint. Um, and it was right in the area that we wanted, so we didn't have to move our students that far. It was maybe 5 minutes away from where the other store was. So everything else kind of worked like that. But yeah, that was an
But I mean,
interesting
even just
year.
like if you just think, like you said, even you just think about from the perspective of this owner, this landlord,
Yeah, yeah,
here these young kids come in their, mid-20s with a business plan that they present to you. And in best case scenario, you're profiting $500 a month.
yeah.
And as an owner, it's like, it's there is no such thing as best case scenario. Like
Totally.
nothing, all of those boxes never get checked, right? And yet he says, yes, sure, come on in.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that,
Wow.
owning our property now, I kind of see the other side of like, and there's also, I don't know if he was looking to like sell it a couple years down the road. So like he just wanted
Sure.
occupancy. So there's all kinds of other things, right, that factor into that. But yeah, I mean, I look back on that and just go, wow, I don't know how that one slipped through the cracks,
Wow.
but that, yeah, that was
Did
a mess.
you so for a full year you were in there next to this sex shop,
Yeah.
and did you have complaints from parents?
You know, I don't remember having, I mean, nothing. I think there was an occasional comment, but I don't think there was nobody said to us, "Hey, I'm not bringing my kids here because you're right next to this
Sure.
place." So,
Wow.
at least it wasn't us. Now, we didn't run the most efficient, and by saying we didn't run an efficient business at all. We didn't have a front desk person. So my business partner and I, when we weren't teaching, would like jump out to the front to like help, anyone who kind of walked in. I don't even think we didn't really have cameras at that time. So if one of us was like on, we'd keep our door open. So if we heard the doorbell, that ring, when you walk in, a little bell that rings,
Right.
one of us would have to like excuse ourselves from the lesson and go out and help somebody, which
Right.
was horrible. I mean, I had students that left me, and I had one parent that just said, "You're not in my kid's lesson. Like, you jump out of the lesson every once in a while." And he was
Yeah.
totally right. So
Yep.
being the teacher and the front desk person and the owner, like, it doesn't work, in that scenario. Um, it took us a good year before we made the switch from just renting a room. So in the beginning, we just rented rooms to other teachers. Hey, we're going to charge you per day, whatever it was, and you run your own business, because that was kind of the model we came from.
Right.
And then after about a year, we were like, wow, we're getting a lot of phone calls in. Why don't we just book the students? They pay us, and then we'll pay the teacher. And so we found another guitar teacher who had like 25 or 30 of his own students who wanted to move from another studio to us. And so we're like, okay, we'll do that, but we're making this new model switch where the students pay us and then we pay you a set amount. And we're like pins and needles when we ask him, this guy's, no way, this guy's gonna say yes. And he's like, yeah, that sounds great. And so even though he was making, not half as much. I mean, we paid him a pretty good, but I mean, he probably took a 30% pay cut at least. And and he said yes, and then we changed the model over. But then again, that put more work on us. So fewer students, that we had to take on because now we've got to get a system where there's billing and you know you had the old credit card swiper. Literally, if you want to take credit cards, there was no
Right.
auto billing at that time, or and people paid cash or check. And people forgot their checks the first week, of course. And then you gotta, hunt
Then you're a debt
people
collector.
down, and you're a debt collector, and yeah, it was hard. Yeah, that was definitely hard.
And yet you grew during that time.
We grew, yeah. So we grew during that time, and then things were getting bigger with the studio, but there was more tension between my business partner and I because he always
Mm,
wanted to open a music studio, and income and money were very forefront on his mind. I think there was some other family stuff there, but that was something that was important to him. And not that it wasn't important to me, but I was doing the band, and that's what I really wanted to do, and I loved that. And so I was gone a lot more when we were on tour, and because we didn't hire a front desk person, when I was gone, he was taking on more of the responsibility,
sure.
which just was not fair on my part at all. And so it kind of came to a head where we were just like, this isn't sustainable when I'm not here as much, and we weren't making enough where we could take a salary where we could say, okay, well then we'll pay you more and pay me less. At that point, we were still the only income we were making was literally what we were making from teaching, and maybe a little bit at the end, but we would always reinvest that, right? We always needed more of this or more of that, more marketing or a, yellow pages ad, that kind of thing. And so so we kind of came to the point right before I got married, actually, where we decided, okay, I'm gonna sell my portion of this, and then you'll just have it, and I'll go on and do something else. So that
Okay,
was the
so
end of
he
my
bought
first.
you out,
He bought me.
essentially.
Yeah,
Okay, okay.
yeah.
And at what point was that, just a couple years in, or
That was probably only 3 years in, 2.5 or 3 years in to the business. So yeah, so I sold my part, and then, then we got married, and then we wanted shortly after that, the band was still going strong at that point, and so we wanted to move up to Santa Rosa, about an hour and a half away, to be closer to the band because I was commuting up there, for rehearsals and gigs a lot. And so, we decided to move up there. And, at the time, so kind of a side note to that was, so my wife is an art educator, and so she does visual arts, painting and drawing and clay and all that stuff. And so she had worked in actually the tech sector for a while and didn't enjoy that. And then worked for an art studio for a while. And then they closed down, and then really wanted to do arts education. And so she was a social worker and really felt like the power of the arts to heal people and to help kids that are struggling. And so we talked a lot about it when I had the music studio, and she's like, "Oh, I'll open my own art place." And I said, the one thing I would do differently is I would go to where the kids are, because at the time we were still struggling to pay rent, to pay utilities. I was taking a lot of our profit was just to have a building, right? And so when we talked about it, I was like, you should go into the schools. And so she found another woman and had a business partner, and so they went into the schools and taught art in the schools. And so that was at the same time I had the studio. So that was being successful. And so then when I sold my business, I was like, oh, let's learn from my stuff, and let's just all the contacts you had for doing art, let's add music to the schools because we already had those in. She was probably in 5 or 6 different schools at that point. And so then we added music to the schools that she was in down in that area. And then we moved up about a year later, when we moved up to the Santa Rosa area, we thought, okay, we'll do the same thing up here. We'll just go into the schools, and we'll probably phase out the schools down in there. At that point, we probably had a dozen teachers on staff. So we actually weren't teaching. They were going out and teaching the contracts. And so we thought, those schools will kind of phase out and that'll be fine. Um, so that was 20 years ago. We still have a handful of those schools
wow.
that just didn't. They're like, can you please continue these programs? We don't want to lose them. And so at the height, we probably were in 20 to 22 schools. between the two areas. But that's basically what we did. We started getting the schools up here, kept the schools down in the East Bay. I would commute maybe once or twice a week to kind of manage those schools and teachers and make sure everything was going smoothly. And then after a while, we got better systems in place where we could do things remotely. Um, and Yeah, so it was great. I mean, to be honest, like
And
that was yeah,
you didn't have a location at this point.
we did not
This
have a
was
location.
you
We
you were just doing art. You weren't even doing music.
were doing music. Yeah, we'd added
Music
music.
you were doing.
Yeah, so we had art and music in the schools. We didn't have a location. We had about 10 or 12 schools that we were doing art and music at. We were running everything out of our home. We had our first child, then we had our second child 3 years later, and we were able to do all of this basically out of our home. And so it really was a great, like, when I look back on it, we were really, really fortunate and blessed that that was able to be the case. We really valued, our family time and wanting to spend time and raise our kids. I didn't want to miss that time, their first steps and when they were young. And yet Lauren and I are equal partners, and especially with the art, I know nothing about art. So I needed her. So, I'm still in the same office. And it's like, there were times where it's like, okay, I'm going to tap you out and I'm going to watch the kids because there's an art question. So you got to come in and answer an art email or phone call because I don't know that one. So we definitely partnered in that sense of, she would do the art, I would do the music, obviously a lot of stuff we would do together. And then we just raised the kids together and did the business together. And it worked for a while.
So, this is interesting. So you sold out your share in the with the partnership,
Yeah.
and then you started doing this kind of this remote, uh, business where you were going into the schools. How did you get into the schools? Like, how did you get those contracts approved with the schools and become like a partner where you could just send a teacher and operate without even a location?
Yeah. So, you know, in California, and one of the big reasons for doing this and continuing to do it, it's getting better. But in California, like I said, my experience was having that different band director every year, and they have been ever since I was in high school in the '90s. They have just been cutting arts programs right and left, and they just didn't have the funding for it, and it wasn't a priority. Right? It was, we're going to keep the football team because we make money on the football team, but we're going to cut the music program, we're going to cut the drama program, we're going to cut the theater program. And so we really thought that that's not good, right? This had given us so much in our lives, and we felt very strongly that the arts were a really important part of education, just like math and history and English. And so that's how we kind of approached it. We went to the schools and said, "Hey, this funding has been cut, and you don't even have a music program or you don't have an art program, and we want to provide this for you." And so a lot of times it would be the PTA. Or the PFC, whatever they kind of, the parent association, and they would do their own fundraising. So we would find out their contact. And usually, their parents of kids that go to the school and want their kids to have a better education. So we would just do a presentation to them. We'd reach out to them and say, hey, for X amount of dollars, we can come in and do an art program, or we can offer music lessons, or we can do a music program, whatever it is. And so a lot of times the principals, if it was a public school, the principal, there's a lot of red tape, right? That what they could do and what they couldn't.
Sure.
But at the time, again, like these parent organizations, they could bypass all that red tape. Whatever agreement they had with the school, if they're like, "Hey, we want to fund this," and the principal's like, "Yeah, let's fund it, let's do it." We had to do the fingerprinting and the teachers and all that legal stuff, but
Sure, yeah.
they just brought us in as an independent contractor, and we would teach, one third grade class or a handful of students after school or the entire school, and they just brought us in for whatever they wanted. One of the elementary schools, we came in and did a huge mural on their multi-purpose room on the outside of it. And all the fifth and sixth graders, I think, for over like 2 months participated in this. So it was like a beautification project and an art project. So we just worked with the schools. It was one of the things that was great about our business, but not sustainable, was we customized everything we did to each school. So whatever that school wanted, we're like, yep, we will make that happen. You want art twice a week for the entire school? We will make that happen. You want one art teacher once a month for one third grade class? We will make that happen. Um, so that's how we kind of got in, is we really customized everything. With the
Hmm.
private schools, it was a little bit easier, to be honest, because whoever the principal or headmaster was, if they said, yeah, let's do it, it was like done, right? You didn't have to go through the district or anything like that.
Right.
So we had
So
a combination of both.
you went That's so cool. So I mean, because it's at the end of the day, it came down to who you talked, who like had the leverage to get you into the school. Like you said, the principals had the red tape they had to deal with. So you, instead of going to the principals, you went to the PTA,
Yeah.
you went to the parents that actually were involved in the school, and you used them as leverage to get you in.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I would say from
And
there, we probably had 6 or 7 schools, and then we didn't know anything about marketing. We just went out and, like, met with people as best we could, but then after, like, 6 or 7 schools, we the rest of the schools we got were literally all word of mouth. So it was
huh,
amazing. It took off. So either, for the public schools, principals have, I think, like, monthly meetings with other principals in their district, and they'll share,
sure.
like, what's going on, and so they would share, hey, I've got this great program that does art and music, and so if you're looking for something like that to supplement X, Y, and Z, they would give us their, I'd get a random call from a principal saying, oh yeah, you're over at the elementary school, this elementary school, and we'd like you to be at our elementary school. There was a private school that we were at that had, went from one location to three locations, and so we opened at all three locations. And then, one, if not two, of the directors left that private school to go to another private school, and they brought us along with them. So it just, one school we got was the band that I was in. The lawyer for the band, her kids were at a private school, and their music director was leaving, and they were just not going to do any music, and she's like, Benji, don't you and your wife do some kind of music thing in the schools? And I was like, yeah. She goes, can you come to our school? So we went out to that school. So it was just kind of random connections, to get these, but a lot of it, after a lot of work on our end in the beginning, was just word of mouth, because these schools were starving for art music. They just didn't have it at all.
So how did the money flow go? Did who paid, like, did the school pay you directly,
So
or is it the PTA, or
yeah,
was it
so I said,
individual parents?
yes, all of it. So, like, that's what I said, is every school is kind of unique. So, some schools we just offered after school private music lessons. Like, so we just, like, a satellite school, right? So we would come in
Sure.
and we would say, hey, we're got a teacher here from 3 to 6, and we would advertise. The school would say, hey, print out 500 flyers, and we will hand them all out in the Friday packets, right? It's before anything's online, before PDFs or
Right.
online registration, anything like that. And so we would make 500 flyers at Kinkos, and deliver them to the school. And, like, I need 5 packets of 20 and 5 packets of 30, right? The whole thing. But the beauty of it was, when you're in a school, and this is something I would certainly encourage if you are in a school and offering, let's say, private music lessons. I'll get to, like, the group classes that we did in a second, but for the private music lessons, we were packed. We couldn't get enough teachers to teach it, because parents, it was so convenient for parents, right? Because
Right.
we did it at school, and we worked with the school to, a lot of schools have aftercare. And so we worked with the school to say, hey, if you have kids in the aftercare, our teacher will walk to the aftercare, we'll pick them up, we'll walk them back, have the private lesson for 30 minutes, and then walk them back, so the parents don't have to do anything. If they're not in aftercare, could we work out some kind of deal where, the kid can come to aftercare for free, as long as we pick them up and we take care of everything, so the parent's not being charged for the private music lesson and the aftercare, right? Because we would have, for example, 4 or 5 teachers there, so we only have 4 or 5 slots at the 3:30 time when everybody gets out of school. So we would try and get all the kids that weren't in aftercare at 3:30, but then the 4 o'clock slot, those kids have to be somewhere for a half hour, so they would be in
Right.
aftercare, and then we get. So we had to work with each school on how that worked, but super convenient for parents. So that was one thing. And then the other was instant credibility, right? Because if a school is putting your flyer out with your name on it, as a parent, I'm thinking, well, this school obviously trusts this company, has vetted this company, believes in this
Right.
company. I mean, there were probably half the parents who didn't even know we were a separate company in the school, right? They just went, oh yeah, there's after school lessons. I mean, they wrote the check to somebody different, right? But they just assumed we were an extension of the school, so we didn't have to. It was before Google reviews, also, but it's like we didn't have to show any kind of credibility other than we're at this school, and being at the school gives us that. And so, and that was an idea actually that came to me, um, early on when I was teaching still in the music retail shop. A woman hired me to teach in the schools during the school day. And so she had contract with a
Mm.
handful of schools, all private schools that had like a pull-out program, which in 25 years we've never been able to do. Um, but she had a relation with like two or three different private schools where you can't pull out a math or English, but anything else, if the kids sign up to take private lessons, I could come and pull them out of an elective. And so I would have a lesson for a drum lesson with a student at this private school for, at 11 to 11:30, in the afternoon on Mondays. And so to me, that was awesome because as a music teacher, right, getting private music students anytime before 3 o'clock is a bonus, right? Because they're in school. And so I kind of saw that model of, oh, you go to the school and you can work with them. And one, I thought, oh, we can get school early, hours early today for our teachers, which we were never able to figure out in that sense. But at least that idea of, oh, when you're at the school, you're part of the school. And so, yeah, so parents would pay us directly for that. And we would give a school a cut of the lessons. And I think we originally, with one of the private schools, negotiated 50 cents per student per lesson is what we gave the school. Right. So we were charging, I don't know, 20 bucks and we were paying the teacher 10 bucks maybe for a half hour lesson. We were
Sure.
paying the school 50 cents and then we were taking the rest. And it costs us $100 worth of flyers, right? To put out there
And you're teaching on their property,
their
in
property.
their space,
Yep.
using their instruments and everything like that?
Yeah. I mean, we would there sometimes. So this is another, those struggles that you have at the beginning. It's like, okay, they'll give us a room. We need a piano. Okay, so what are we going to do? We don't want to teach on a cheap keyboard, and they didn't really have a lot of the, today you can get a touch sensitive keyboard for $100. You couldn't back then, and
Right,
so I'd get on Craigslist. I would find somebody selling a used like Clavinova, those Yamaha Clavinovas, 88 key,
right.
big suckers. And we had a minivan, and I would, drive into, I'd call someone or email them, just say, hey, do you have this instrument for $100 or $200? And I'd drive over there and pick it up, and then I'd go to the school and drop it off. And so we'd have that, and we'd keep that at the school. I mean, we probably have some, and in fact, I know we have like three or four that I bought then 20 years ago that are still at those schools that we're still using. Yeah, sitting in a room.
Yeah, those things last forever.
Yeah,
They're tanks.
yeah, yeah,
That's amazing. What an incredible strategy that you guys developed, through, uh I mean, it sounds like through trial and error, like Lauren was doing this with the art, and then you just adopted it and then introduced music as something as well. So the pitch was essentially going to the, like you said, the private schools are easier because they probably had less red tape that they had to
exactly.
kind of deal with. But obviously public schools are huge because there's way more, oftentimes way more students that you have access to
Yeah.
at that point. And so, how did this develop into, Art and Soul, like, having its own location? When did that transition happen? And frankly, like, I mean, maybe somebody might be thinking like, "Well, why even open a brick and mortar?" It sounds like that was working really well.
Yeah, so there are a couple factors in that. One was, when we moved up to the Santa Rosa area, we started raising our kids, and we thought, okay, we'll phase out, the studios down in the East Bay, and we'll build studios up here. It starting from scratch again was a lot harder, right? Especially now with two kids and still managing all the studios down in the East Bay. And we realized, because I grew up there and because we lived there for a number of years, like we had a decent amount of contacts that kind of helped us in the beginning, and then word spread, and so it had grown to this. And to start from scratch up here was much more difficult. We didn't I knew guys in the band, but that was it. Like I had no connections to anybody else.
Mm,
And so what happened was, we at the beginning we just didn't get any schools up here, and we thought, okay, well, we can still survive as a family on the schools down there, but if they start to fade away, which there were some cracks in our systems, obviously, and then this it you start to realize the negatives to it. A lot of positives to it, but the negatives to it being that the school has a connection with the teacher because they see that teacher every day, not you. So we started having schools that would approach our teachers and say, hey, we now have the money for a full-time art teacher. Can we hire you directly? And it's going to get
mm.
retirement and benefits and all of that stuff. And I remember the first school and the first teacher that did that to me. It was hard. It hit us hard of just like, oh, we have no control over that. And that teacher took that, and I'm all for it. Like I want what's best for the teacher, but it was a big contract for us. At the time, it was probably a 20% of our business contract, like gone. And so I was like, oh,
Wow.
that's we can't be susceptible to that. We've got to have a little bit more control. Because if every school did that one year, then we'd be in serious trouble. Um, so uh so it's like we need to focus more on getting schools at least locally where we can show our face a little bit more and have a little bit more contact with. And as our kids were getting older, it was harder for us to be in an office at our house and not be distracted, right? But when you got a baby, that's one thing, but when you got a toddler and they're knocking at the door and they're like, where's my lunch, and it's you've got two of them, it was just harder. It's like, well, why don't we get an office outside of our house that we can go to. We'll put in like office hours so we can start to separate family life and business a little bit more. And we looked at hiring. Let's hire, an admin person that can take these calls and help, market us a little bit more. And so we hired somebody. They worked in our home for a couple hours, a couple days a week, and then we were looking for an office space. And Lauren, between the two of us, we're both dreamers, but she's the bigger picture dreamer. And so what turned into let's find a little like 400 square foot, 200 square foot office turned into a 2,000 square foot space where we can open our own programs. So that's how that we never got the little office. We're like, well, as long as we're getting an office, and we're like, well, maybe in the office we could offer like some lessons in the office when we're not doing admin work there, and that could be how we could get in to start offering. And then it just the plans just grew from there. Um, so we looked around, some areas, and we found an owner who was super nice. We joined a mastermind group at the time that was big on having a space and all the systems that you put in this space. So it really made sense that time to go. Oh, we have a mastermind group that we meet with. We traveled all over the country to go to these seminars and lectures, and half of them were speakers that were come in and talk about business and business models and that kind of stuff. And then the other half of the time, they called it the nuts and bolts, and it was literally like, what phone system do you use? What marketing tactics do you use? All that stuff. So like,
Oh,
oh, that's really practical, but 80% of it is practical when you have a physical location. But so now that we have this resource to help us, we're not, starting from scratch with no knowledge of how to open a physical location, how to market that. So we had that resource. We said, yep, this is the time to do that. And because they were also big on like, hey, you should own your own space. And if you can't, you should at least do like a rent to own. So we had a space, our very first space, where we worked out a deal that we could buy the space within 5 years or after 5 years, that we could buy that location. And there was kind of a parameters around that. And so we moved in this space and we did art and music. And that's how we kind of opened that one space. And we had no students locally when we opened because we weren't really even in any schools that did private lessons. We did some group classes for art in some local schools, and we just literally started that from scratch. Uh,
wow.
yeah, that was a big leap of faith. To
I was just about to ask. So, like, signing that lease, or I guess, lease to own,
Yeah.
knowing that you're taking on this new expense, um, without any direct revenue to offset that from month one. What, like, how, and you said Lauren's a big dreamer, and she's awesome. I think, she's brilliant, with the fact that you guys were able to bring both of your expertise together and work towards that. So you were both together, "Let's do this," or was there one of you that was a little bit more hesitant than the other?
We both were definitely in it. I think this was I always say Lauren's like 51%, I'm 49%, right in there.
Uh-huh.
So it was definitely um her path of wanting. Like I said, she was a social worker for a long time and really believes in the power of healing in the arts. And so she had a couple, challenges in her path up the mountain to get where she wanted to be. She, thought at one point she's gonna be an arts therapist, and that didn't really work out for some reasons. And so this was a path that she really wanted to take. And I was all in. I was like, yeah, I love the vision. I love where it's going. And if I can bring some music into that too, and you bring the art into it, like I think this can be something that's really powerful. And we were getting really good, from the schools, and we were getting really good feedback. And finding teachers that wanted to do this was, I mean, we'd put a Craigslist ad out, and we'd have 20, 30 people within a couple days of like, yeah, I want to go teach and do this. And so it was just, yeah, I mean, I think it all kind of built, and Lauren kind of was leading the charge. But we were both, we loved it for different reasons, right? I loved it because of the freedom it gave me to raise our kids and continue to play, right? Because I was still playing and touring with the band, so it gave me that freedom, and I wasn't beholden to like, oh, I have to ask for time off, and you only get so many days off, and could you get fired for your job? It was always a conversation between the two of us of how much are we going to put in, and who's watching the kids at this point, and who's doing work at this point, and um, but we get along so well, and we're both night owls. So I remember times when the kids get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and can't go back to sleep, we're like, okay, I guess we're talking work. So like when feeding the kids or rocking them back to sleep, we're talking about ideas, and sitting at the computer and writing things out. So I mean, it was 24/7.
It's this is something that doesn't get talked about a whole lot, which I think is important. My wife and I were very much in the business together, especially at the beginning,
Yeah.
where she was, same thing. Pretty much every spare moment we had, we were talking about some kind of strategy or some hiring. Like who should we hire for this instrument, or there was always, it was kind of always in the back of our minds, and that partnership really fueled the growth of the business. It really did, because there were strengths that she had that I just simply didn't have,
Yep.
right? And vice versa. And so having that combination is very powerful. Uh, but I'm so curious. So you open this thing with no students, you sign a lease, 2,000 square feet.
Yeah.
You've got teachers interested, teachers in the, how did you get students at the very beginning?
Um, Man, I trying to even think like, we tried, we put out word of mouth. We put out some ads in magazines. We tried all kinds of different things, to be honest. We did big banners in the local mall, those digital signs. We did those. We did radio ads. We reached out a lot to our kids. Were then in school, in like elementary school, so we reached out to the schools that our kids were in, um, and started there. But it was a slow growth. We had our grand opening. I'll never forget this. We had our grand opening, and we had a decent amount. We done, like I said, some radio ads. We sent out some other marketing stuff.
Sure.
We were in a few schools at the time, so we did have a mailing list of kids that had been in our programs for. Mailing list was, I don't know, maybe 100 kids. Like, it wasn't a lot, but it was enough. And we had a lot of family and friends that came, so it felt full. But we had one wall. We didn't even have enough money to finish out the space. So we worked out a deal with the landlord where they built out like half the rooms, and then we would have to build out the rest. So part of the building in the back was just one big empty room, and it was supposed to be like three more private lesson rooms. And we had to get to that later on. Once we generate some more income, we would do that. So we had a huge empty wall, and we bought this dry erase board sticker that was on this wall, and Lauren drew out all the classes we were going to offer, all the lessons we were going to offer, and there must have been 100 boxes. And as students
Oh,
come in, we're just going to fill in their names, right? At the end of our day, there were 2 boxes full, and it was one kid in two different, wanted like a private piano lesson and an art class, and like that was it. And I was just like, oh, this is not sustainable. So we just hustled. We went to local schools. We did the same. We used a lot of the same strategies we did in the schools, which was we went to local schools and partnered with them to run like after school classes, and that allowed us to not just run the after school class, but then market our studio. So on the bottom of the flyer, it would say, if this doesn't work for you, or you're interested in, let's say it was a flyer for an art class, we say, if you're interested in music lessons or music classes, we also have a local studio. It's located at this address. You can find us online here. And so a school, again, a public school with like 500 students, now we've reached 500 kids, right? And this, from the school standpoint, we're offering a program for their school, so that's fine. And from our standpoint, not only are we doing that, and I would say maybe half of those programs would actually run at the school. Some, half of them wouldn't have enough enrollment to get that class after school running, which just was fine because again, it costs us $100 to make 500 flyers, and now we've reached 500 families, to market with us. So that was probably one of the biggest strategies we did is we went to local elementary and middle schools and used that tactic, to
Mhm.
market. And then it just started to pick up and grow.
Was there ever a point where, in the first few months or even the first year where you just felt like more money is going out than is coming in? There's that point of break even that every a startup has to contend with, right? Like you're in the red from day one, you know? And so the goal is to get to break even as fast as possible,
Yeah.
right? And so was there ever a point where you were concerned or worried?
I don't know if there was a point where I wasn't concerned or worried. I mean, it was, yeah, I mean, it was constant, right? You constantly struggle with, okay, what are we, and even at the time, and at, your personal finances and business finances are just all enmeshed, right? At least for us, because it was, well, we need a little bit more money, for our households. We've got to pull it from somewhere, so we pull it more from the business. Well, okay, that leaves us a little bit less for marketing or whatever else, but that's what the business is there for, to because that was our only, we didn't have any other, like I said, we haven't worked for anybody else in over 20 years. So there were certainly times where I was like, well, maybe I need to get, it wasn't called a side hustle at the time. I was like, maybe I need to get another job or some other,
Yeah,
income stream. But we just kept coming back to, but if we put more energy and more effort and more time into this, it's going to grow. I think having seen it grow from the first 10 years. So that was the first 10 years of our business was only in the schools. In the last 10 years, we opened that brick and mortar in 2013. So it's the last 12 years, we've had
okay.
a brick and mortar. And so, yeah, I think that it was always stressful, but stress brings, creativity. And so you got to figure out, like I said, how do you market without spending thousands of dollars? The radio ad was super awesome to hear when you're driving, to hear your ad on the radio. I don't know if we got anybody from it, and it was expensive. And we stopped doing that pretty quickly because it was just kind of a me like, look, I've made it. I have an ad on the radio, but
Yeah,
we didn't see the ROI on it. So, you had to look at things like that and just go, okay, what's for us and what actually does the business need? And luckily we were still had all those clients in the East Bay, and they were even growing. And so we were getting more. And so instead of turning them down, we just say, yeah, if another client pops up and it's an hour and a half commute and I've got to drive down there and set that up, like I'm going to keep doing that because there's money there, income there, and we can't afford to let those go while we're building this up. So we had a little backup. We had some income still coming in from that could help support, this growing business. But yeah, I mean, it was touch and go for a while. We had a great landlord. We got some really good advice to structure, your rent really low at the beginning and then gradually get higher as we knew we would be making more money. So it was more risk for them, obviously, but it was a calculated risk of, hey, if Benji and Lauren in Art and Soul is going to make it, I mean, as the landlord, I'm going to make my money over I think it was a 4-year lease. Maybe it was a 5-year lease, might have been a 5-year lease. So I'm going to make my money over. I'll just make a little more in the back end. But if I charge them a lot in the beginning and their business folds, then I'm not going to make anything, when so he was really smart in that sense, and a super nice guy. Um, it was a shell when that was partly why we could do the deal because part of our income was going to help him build this out. And so we got to work with an architect on how to build it out exactly the way we wanted. Like I said, we had to come up with cutting costs of not building it out all the way we wanted and only doing half it at the beginning. But then he had to have inspectors, and I'll never forget there was an inspector that came in and said, "Oh no, we can't give you occupancy because your toilet roll dispenser is 6 inches too close to the toilet or too far away from the toilet, and I can't sign off on it. And you've got to rip the entire wall out and redo that before I can sign off on it." And our grand opening that we had marketed for months was like in 2 weeks. And we were like
jeez.
stressed. And the landlord was so great. I'll never forget. He came up and he came up to Lauren and he said, "You're going to have your grand opening. I don't care if there's a penalty, a fine, I'll pay it. you're gonna open and it's gonna be great. Um, and so that was great. He was a student of ours. His ex-wife and 2 kids were students of ours when we in the first year when we opened. Super supportive, really nice guy. So those things helped, when people believe in you and support you. But the money was still, yeah, super stressful for sure.
Well, and it obviously speaks to the way you guys presented yourself. I think that really matters because like you're starting an organization, you're starting this business, you go in, you sell this to the landlord. Even the first place that you opened when you were 23, 24 years old, obviously you had some charisma, Benji, because you convinced this guy to open up this, to allow you to open up this school with your business partner. So you and Lauren, I think, brought that charisma, and so they believed in you. And I think that's a really instructive thing. Like when you're starting talking with landlords, you really do have to sell yourself to them
Yeah,
because they are taking a risk. Even though they're going to collect money, you're going to be their tenant. They are taking on a risk,
yeah,
right? Because if it doesn't work out, that ends up costing them a lot more money. So there is a salesmanship that has to happen as the you know incoming tenant, and you guys obviously did that very well because he believed in you. He was student of the school and was supporting you guys. But you did get that grand opening. Did you end up getting a penalty, or did
no,
that end up
no, no. The inspector came back, different inspector, could care less about that and signed off on it. Yeah, didn't even. And I
Wow.
think I remember the contractor basically said, "Hey, we fixed the bathroom thing. Did you check that?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's fine." So, it was because
Wow.
it was a different inspector that came in. Yeah, dealing with the city.
So money is always such a stressor, and I think at the beginning when you're opening up, most people always want to know that, like, how do you get new students? How do you get to that break even point? You guys, I love what you said. You just hustled, and it was a concern. It was an issue, and you didn't just grow by hundreds of students, in like a month or two or something like that. That wasn't your path. You guys worked. You worked hard, and you just buckled down and you did it. Um, how would you say your approach to marketing has changed over the years, or has it?
I think it has changed in the sense that with having um, more systems and having yourselves established a little bit more, you have more funds to put in, right, to marketing. And so the approach we've taken is, and again, this is something we learned like in the mastermind group is um, know what your strengths are. And if something is not your strength, then hire somebody else whose strength it is, right, to do those things. So in the beginning, it was, hire a good bookkeeper or accountant because I can't balance, a balance sheet. It's like that's not my forte, and so I want to hire somebody that in the end is going to save you money on taxes or keep your books straight or whatever it is. And so I think through this process we've hired other companies to do some marketing for us, or we've outsourced some things, but we've also gotten to know, like I said, with the radio thing, like what works and what just doesn't. And so if something works, we just put more funds towards that. And so magazines worked really well for us. We put a lot of money into magazines, but then it was like, but not every magazine, right? And so then you have to kind of look back and go, okay, what specific things, and what specific magazines and what times during the year do things really work for you? So I think it's become more of a targeted approach. It isn't just this, at that time it was like, what's going to work? You throw out everything. It's yard sign. We did yard signs. We did banners, the flyers, the ads at the mall, the radio ads, all that stuff, emails. Um, Word of mouth, all those things. And then you just over the years you realize what really works for us in our area in our industry. It can be different for obviously different industries, different studios in different areas. And then we just focused more on those. And if we could afford to hire, um, people that were more experts in that area, then we would do that and keep checking on, make sure we're getting the return on it that we need. And if we're not, um, then quickly move on, and not continue to throw money down the drain if we didn't need to.
Yeah, I think that's so wise. Dan Kennedy talks about this too. He talks about keeping the marketing channels that you are investing in to get new business ruthlessly accountable. right? So if they're producing an ROI, great, put more money into it. If they're not, get rid of them, right? And move on to the next one. But by keeping them accountable, you're actually measuring the result. So I put a dollar in, I get $2 back. Great. I'll put more money into that. But if I'm only getting 75 cents back from this dollar, then I'm going to get rid of that because I'm literally losing money off of that. So I no, I think that's very, very smart. You mentioned not being an expert at everything. It made me think of a book by Dan Sullivan. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a business coach, but he wrote this book called Who Not How, and it's a really really good book. It's an easy read, but it's basically the idea that you've got lots of ideas as an entrepreneur. You got lots of ideas. There's all you want to take on the world and do all these amazing things, but it is impossible for you to be an expert at everything. So instead of thinking, how can I accomplish all of these things? Ask, who can help me accomplish this task or this next venture that I'm going to jump into? Um, and anyway, very simple concept, but very powerful, especially for entrepreneurs. But again, it sounds like that's exactly what you guys have done
Yeah.
um, in that process. Um, so I love what you say about marketing. I think we're cut from the same cloth with that. I like to define it as multi-channel marketing. I didn't come up with that phrase, but that's essentially what it is. They all work together, but you have to be in a lot of different places because people are they're not all the same. They look in different places. They hang out in different places, and so that's a super super cool thing. Well, let's talk a little bit about your staffing because this is something that you have had to deal. I mean, even before you had a location, you were managing these teachers as independent contractors, and you were obviously finding them and hiring them, then managing them and talking to them and dealing with them. So, can you like go back a little to when you first were starting to hire teachers? Like, how has your approach to hiring teachers changed, since from the very beginning?
It's a great question. I feel like, to be honest, I feel like the teachers have changed. I don't know if I mean, I guess our approach has had to change, but definitely the teachers have changed and how to manage them has definitely changed. I mean, our approach in the beginning, literally, like I said, it was there was no Indeed or ZipRecruit or anything. I mean, it was Craigslist, right? So you put an ad on Craigslist looking for a music teacher, looking for an art teacher. We would, drive down, meet at a coffee shop and to do the interview process and do a background check on them, and then we would take them to the school on the first day, introduce them to the staff, and then get them off and running. And then a lot of times I didn't see them for months, right? We'd constantly be checking in, but as long as there was no issues, um, and that usually wasn't a problem. um, and so I think we had so many people that wanted to do it. We kind of had our choice, right? Like I said, 20, 30 applicants would come in the first couple of days. So we could really weed out the duds. Lauren did HR for a tech company for a long time and worked on hiring. So her hiring process and how she does it is great and is a really good judge of character. And so those types of things, we had a lot to choose from. And so we chose what worked the best, and most of the time it worked out for us. I think now is a harder time. The last couple of years has been a harder time. There's either more people doing what we're doing, or there are not as many strong candidates, I feel like, as there used to be. And I'm sure there's a ton of factors in that. It might be age, it might be, millennials, or, whatever, you want to look at in that type of productivity, or what upcoming kids, young adults are looking for, or demanding in their life. I'm sure it's economics of, we're in California, it's expensive to live in California. So, having a part-time job teaching music 5 to 10 hours a week, you got to be a student, or you have to have a partner that's very wealthy and it's a part-time thing for you, or you got another job, or whatever it is, but you're not making a living teaching 10 hours a week. or 15 hours a week kind of thing. So um, I think the approach has definitely been, and we moved. I'll say this: we also moved from independent contractor employees, right? So then there's a whole different uh, set of standards and challenges that come along with that. And we're still learning, right? We're learning every day on how to manage that. But I think having our thing over the last couple of years has been, in the first couple of years, it was us. It was Benji and Lauren, and then all of our teachers, right? And so we managed all those teachers one on one. There's direct communication. If there's a problem, we had that conversation directly with that teacher. But we had maybe a dozen teachers, right? So that was manageable. Now we've got a
Sure.
staff of like 50, so it's not manageable for us to have the brick and mortar and the school still and manage 50, 60 people. And so we've just had to bring in, we call middle management, right? We've got an art director, a music director, a dance director. We've got a studio manager. Um, and there's us. And so you just bring in as you get a bigger team, you've got to have those levels that help you manage, that staff, or you can't, it'd be 80 hours a week of one person just doing that. And that's not what we can do with our business, because we've got to do the marketing and the hiring and the growth and the vision and everything else.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think one of the challenges I know that we faced was, like if you want to scale your business, you have to find people that can actually do the job that you have been doing, and caring as much as you care, or at least
Yeah.
caring a lot. So a manager, essentially, or a general manager, to be able to, hire the teachers, to train them, to monitor them, to do all of that, and that can be a very difficult person to find, when you're in that scaling phase, when you're in that growth phase, and so. But what I'm impressed with is that even at the beginning, you and Lauren were able to hire teachers, and you mentioned it. She was good at looking at their character, and this is something that I think that it really ultimately comes down to, because I don't know about you, but over the years, I mean, I hired hundreds of teachers, and it was like every once in a while you'd have one that they're a little shifty, like they maybe presented themselves one way, and ultimately we've come to find out that really they had some ulterior motives. They were doing their little thing on the side and kind of siphoning students over, or trying to siphon students over, and you have to deal with that, and that's never a very fun thing to deal with. um, and so, but character matters a lot
Yeah.
when you're hiring. And so, how do you hire somebody? Like, what are those things that you are identifying when you're? Because I mean, like when you interview somebody, it's like, how many questions can you really ask them?
Yeah. Yeah.
How good can you really get to know them before you actually say, okay, I'm entrusting you with my students
Yeah.
that I paid a lot of money to acquire, and here you go, now you can start teaching. So in that, like, do you have a system, like an onboarding system, or like when you're hiring teachers, what does it look like in your school?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so I'll do the process first. The process is, we'll put an ad out, or on our website we have a link that says, "Hey, if you're interested in teaching with us, fill out this form." So someone will apply, and if it looks like they have what we're looking for, whether let's say it's a teacher, so a piano teacher, they've got some experience. Um, Lauren sets up a Zoom interview with them first. Goes over all the like details, and all the factual, like, "Hey, we're looking for a piano teacher. We're looking for whatever Tuesdays and Thursdays. Do you have a car? Do you live close to the studio? This is what it pays. These are how many hours it is. Does that work in your schedule?" That type of thing. And then a lot of times you, as the interviewer, and I've heard Lauren do this, thousands of times, like, more than they do sometimes about what they need. Right? So a lot of times we're like, "Oh, I don't have a car, but it's gonna be totally fine. I'll take public transportation." Like, if your studio is not near a bus stop or public transportation, and you've done that before, which we had, and it didn't work out well, you're just like, "I don't think this is a good fit for you," because it's just not, no matter how you think it's gonna work, it's not gonna work. Or, "Oh, I'll just, I'll get another job, and that won't interfere with this, during that time." It's like, okay, a lot of times, like, get the other job first, and then we can sprinkle you in around that. So those types of things, I think you kind of, as over time, you get to know, like they said, what you
Yeah.
know is going to work and what's not going to work, and even in their sake. And the times that we've went, no, but they're really good. Let's ignore that. 90% of the times come back and bite us in the butt. Or it's like, we should have known. We didn't listen. We should have known. Every once in a while it'll be okay, but most of the time it's not. So you do the Zoom interview, get through all that. Then we ask for references. So references are big for us, right? We want to know, um, we've got a list of like 10 questions. We send an email reference out. So it's really quick. And they can be personal references or professional references, but we ask things like, does this person show up on time? Were they dependable? Right? Because that's a big thing. If it's a music teacher and they've taught lessons before, and we're either getting a reference from another studio they used to work at, or from a parent, right, of a student that they have, it's, hey, have they ever canceled lessons? How often do they cancel lessons? Those types of things. So just how dependable they are, how do they work under stress? So a bunch of questions on that we get back. It's usually a 1 through 10. And anyone who gets like a 7 or below, we pretty much, no, thank you. I mean, we're looking for the tens in that. And there's a section at the bottom, please give us any other information we want to know. And those candidates who their references come back and people write, you would be, you would be, um, you should definitely hire this person. They're going to make your company so much better. Like when someone takes the time to write something and not
Yeah.
just fill out 1 through 10, you've got someone there that at least you want to, move along with. Um, there have, you would
So
be,
you actually get people to fill out a form, like
yes,
references
yeah,
that they'll fill out a form. They'll take the time to do that,
because like I said, it should take them less than like 10 minutes. Um,
right?
and because I think it's 8 or 9 questions. It's a 1 through 10, scale on 1 to 10, and then it's that last question. Is there anything else you'd like to add? And not everybody fills that last one out, but those that do, we kind of know those candidates, and so we say you can
What
send us
what
one.
kind of questions do you put on that form?
So questions are, uh, let's see. Yeah. How often have they canceled? Are they on time? How do they deal with stress in a stressful situation? How long have they been with your company? Like longevity is kind of big for us. We don't. It's not a make it or break it, but if you have someone in their 40s and they've worked for 10 different companies over the last 15 years, and every year and a half they're switching companies, that might be a red flag. Um, we ask, uh, man, Lauren does this. So you're on.
Those are no, those are great questions.
Yeah.
I was just curious, it's like it's the approach that you're taking, but
Yeah.
no,
Well,
I think that makes a lot of
there's
sense.
not one question that's like, "Ooh, this one is the secret
Yeah.
one that we're trying to get." You kind of put it all together, but you get it from, at least 3 different people. We tell our candidate we cannot hire anyone unless we've gotten 3 references back. So you can send us more, if you want, but we need to get at least 3, 3 back. So then we look through those, and then if those references look good, then we bring them in for an in-person interview, and then you kind of get the vibe. And we didn't used to always do the in-person interview. It used to be like um, hey, you said you could teach piano, and you got these references back. You're hired. That's great. And why don't you come on in? We'll do paperwork. And there was a time, I can't remember, like maybe 8 or 9 years ago, Lauren did an interview for a piano, and she's like, "Oh, why don't you just, play something for me?" And the guy couldn't play. And
Mm,
Lauren's like, "Oh, I need to actually have a, like, we got really far in the interview process before I realized this guy can't play enough to even teach." Like, it wasn't, we don't hire university educated, they don't need to have degrees in music. We just need them to be able to, be able to play and teach, and, at a
right.
certain level. Most of our students are beginners, so it's not even a very high level. But along the way you realize, oh, there's some more checks and balances I need to put in to weed out any other, you know, problems that we might have. But I think it's definitely personality. Experience is great, but not a make it or break it. Um, I think more if people are willing, a little bit humble, they're willing to take feedback. A lot of what we do in the hiring process, I feel like, gives us a good sense is what questions they ask us right at the end of the
Mm,
interview. So Lauren always says in her first interview, which I think is awesome, she'll say, "Hey, this is an interview process, kind of a get to know you. But if you have any questions for me, you can stop at any time and ask me questions." And at the end, she'll always say, "Do you have any questions for me?" And so, people that want to know, like, "Well, how did you get started in your business?" Like, want to connect with you personally. What is the, we share the mission and vision of our business, but if we missed it or they missed it and want to know more about that, those are the kind of, tell me more about the other teachers that teach at your studio. How many hours, is realistic for me to get when I first start? Like questions that they ask really make you feel like, oh, they get it, right? They understand what they're walking into. Um, if the first question is, well, I see what your pay rate is, but when am I be eligible for a raise? If your first question is about money, we call them the mercenary. So maybe that's, you
Give them a label.
yeah,
Yeah, I love it.
and so maybe that's someone that you need to be a little bit more, weary of. Okay, money motivates this person, and again, not that that's an end all be all. That we would definitely not hire that person, but it's just something to have on your radar of like, okay, so they're going to be motivated by money. So, um, what does that look like? So yeah, so a lot of it I think is the questions you get back. So that's for our teachers. If we ever hire any front desk staff, which we're currently doing, we're doing some hiring. Um, we usually we'll do a little bit. We do that same process, but we do a little bit more as far as the in person, because over Zoom you can only get so much
Right, yeah.
information from them, and that in person is more valuable. Depending on the position, we'll have the rest of our team, like our admin team, will interview them all together. Each admin person will ask their own question, so we kind of see how, when they're answering a question, are they only looking at me or Lauren, giving the owner, the owners, or are they looking at the person who is our front desk admin or music director who asked them a specific question? Are they addressing them and their question, kind of thing? So they're all those little tidbits kind of put together. What kind of vibe do you want at your studio? Is this person an outgoing, bubbly, friendly person that is at your front desk that you need? Or are they an advanced cello teacher and you need an advanced cello teacher? So, there's not a lot of
Right.
those out there. So maybe you can't have as high a threshold for those, supply and demand in that kind of sense.
Are um do you pay pretty competitively in your market, or how does that balance with, because you said you switched your teachers over from independent contractors to employees. So obviously there's an added cost with that, right? With employment tax and all of that. Um did like so how do you pay your teachers?
Yeah, so we're pretty competitive. We pay them for the hours that they teach, for our teachers, and I think I mean, we have School of Rock in our area, and I know we pay more than School of Rock. There aren't a lot of studios in our area, to be honest, that do what we do. And so that gives a lot of advantage to kind of set our pay structure the way it is. So there are a handful of music studios, but they use the old model that we used years ago, right? Which was they just rent out a room to a teacher and the teacher runs their own business.
Right.
So we don't really compare ourselves to them. I was like, great, if you want to go do that, like knock yourself out. But you've got to do all your own marketing and expense and all that stuff. And some of our teachers, we don't really do a non-compete clause. It's really actually not enforceable. We've had some issues with it in the past, and it really just isn't enforceable. So our philosophy and our attitude is there are enough students out there for everybody, and everybody needs, we believe everybody needs arts education. And so we encourage our teachers, hey, if you have another business that you work for or another studio or you teach on your own, that's totally fine. Like that's not that's great. And you probably make more, teaching on your own, having your own,
Yeah.
that's great. But the students that we give you need to stay at the studio. Like that's our only, because we spend lots of money, like you said, to get those students. So those students have to stay here. So if you decide to move on and not teach for us, that's great. But those students have to stay here. And we make that very clear in the beginning. And if there's any pushback on that, then that's a huge red flag for us. Well, what if they've been my student for 2 years and they really like me, and they want to come with me? I can't stop them if they want to come with me, kind of thing. Um, so those are red flags. But yeah, I think we're pretty competitive. We also talk about how it's a culture and working in our studio that you can't always put a dollar amount on. So if we found a lot of our music teachers also teach art, and a lot of our dance teachers also teach music. So when you come into our studio, that we have a lot of teachers that can teach different modalities, so they can earn money by teaching, dance class and then a violin lesson an hour later. And so if you work in a music studio that even pays you a little bit higher, you can't teach that dance class unless you go to a dance studio. Then you got to drive, to those and coordinate your schedule that way, where we do all of your coordinating here. So there's that. We offer 401ks. We offer, I got this from another BAM, and it might have even been Mike, um, another BAM squad coach, that we offer all of our staff free music lessons,
Mm, that's
and
smart.
they
Yep.
love it. We first started doing it with just our admin. We're like, okay, as you know, we this is what we pay as our admin rate, and you're not a musician, usually, or a dancer or an artist, and so if you'd like to take a private music lesson, that's just my bonus if like you like it. And then Mike had said, oh, you could have your teachers do it, and one if they wanted to take their same instrument but at a higher level, right, to get better at their instrument, or to take another instrument because they've always been curious, and right, and for what the studio gets is if you got a piano teacher taking, ukulele lessons and they get to a competent level, that teacher could sub for a ukulele lesson. And I said,
Right.
oh, that's nice. I would say at least half of our staff, probably more, are taking private music lessons from another staffer. I bet it's probably 60 or 70%, actually.
And are they ongoing lesson? Like, are they taking a lesson spot every single week?
It's a half hour private lesson. Now we have said they can't be during prime lesson hours. And
Hours.
so they need
Sure.
to be, I don't think we put a cap on it, but I think we said like before 2 o'clock is preferable, um,
Sure.
to do that. And if there is a student that needs that time, then they're going to have to take preference, and you got to bump that and move that to another day.
They gotta move too.
The
Yeah.
teacher
Yeah.
gets paid their full pay, and the student that is the teacher of our studio, but who's the student, gets that for free, a half hour lesson. And some of the teachers have enjoyed it so much that they have wanted to pay for an additional lesson on top of that. So they take two lessons a week, one's free and one they pay for. And they get a discount on it being a teacher, but they still, pay a rate for that.
Well, and I just think that's great because that's just another perk to the job,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because they work there, you talked about the 401k, you talked about, like the culture and the pay, like is competitive itself on the hourly rate, but then they also people love perks.
Yeah.
I think in general, I think it's one of those things that like um when you think of benefits, health like I think most people when they think, "Oh, they pay benefits," it's health
Yeah.
benefits, right? Health benefits are tough. As an employer, they are so tough
We
to
can't,
pay out,
no,
and they're
we've tried for years. Yeah.
they're so expensive,
Yeah.
and it doesn't even oftentimes, it doesn't even really like, a decent health plan is cost prohibitive, right? Yeah, so it's like but there's so many other things you can do.
Yeah.
There's so many other benefits that you can offer that people will still really value, and so I love that. I think that's a really cool thing. So, okay, so you've got these teachers, they're doing all these different modalities, and you're actually breeding more teachers within your school, which I think is brilliant. I think that's so smart. I wish I would have thought of that, honestly. I think that's great. Um, so you're with your CRM, like how do you manage all this stuff? Like that is so many different things, so many things happening at your school. How do you manage this with your software? Like in when did you guys kind of stumble or discover Opus One, and
Yeah.
how do you use it to run all this?
Opus is great. We could not run what we do without Opus. To be honest, we've been using them for, I think we're going on our fourth year, using them. It was another BAM squad member, Nick, who had found them, and ironically, the owner of Opus is, his wife owns three studios, two or three studios that are like an hour and a half from us. So they're
Okay,
in
yeah.
California, they're in Silicon Valley, so they're close to us. Um, and so Nick showed me the software. We had a software before that we had a woman, down in Southern California who had created this software for dance studios, for her son who was a dance teacher. And so she created for him,
Mhm.
had maybe 10 or 11 clients. But as things were like growing, just couldn't keep up with the pace of everything that we needed. So she was shutting down. So we were going to have no CRM. So we were kind of panicking. So we were researching a bunch, and Nick had thrown this one out there, and I met with Sam and looked at everything it could do, and it looked great. So we switched to them. And it's been great. I mean, it's made mainly for music, for music lessons. So we have had to adapt for some of the classes. We've been able to do it pretty well, for dance classes and our art classes. But we try and do as much as we can through Opus. So all of the schedules are on there for all the classes, all the teachers, their availability is on there. Um, we tell our teachers, we just had a training a couple weeks ago, and we'll say like, hey, Opus is like, it's like the Bible, right? Like that's where you're going to go if your schedule, whatever schedule is on Opus, that is what we are assuming you are going to be teaching. And if you can't do something on that's on your schedule, you need to let us know, because that's what we're planning on. And it is a, I mean, it is a puzzle, right? It is Tetris times a thousand, because we have got, like I said, we're still in about 20 different schools. So we've got to manage the teachers that are at the schools in different locations, and their availability and the school, and then some travel time, right? So if they're to school in the morning, we have a lot of morning contracts now, which is phenomenal. They're done at 2:45 at a school. Can they make it back and have a 3 o'clock lesson at our studio? You know, maybe if the school's across the street, but if they're a half hour away, nope, then it's got to be, they can't start teaching till 4 o'clock. And then, okay, if they're 4 o'clock, is there a room available at our space? So yeah, there's all that. So we use all the features of Opus. We use Opus Plus, which helps, a ton. But just the room availability, the teacher availability, the scheduling on there is, I mean, our front desk staff has, you know, Opus open 24/7. Like that's their main one. The only I should say the only thing we use some other systems too. The other big one we use is WhatsApp. And
Mhm,
so
mhm.
we use that for our internal teacher communication. Um, and the reason behind that is almost everybody has WhatsApp and kind of knows it, so it's easier to do that way. But we were realizing in Opus, the texting through Opus, one of the challenges was we have the texting and it's phenomenal with our clients, but with our teachers, they're constantly getting updates from Opus for, classes are starting and new students have been added. And so we just didn't want to add even more flooding to that when we're like, hey, do you have this available?
Right.
Or hey, we've got a cancellation kind of thing. So we move over to WhatsApp. It's got its challenges too. I don't know if it's a perfect system, but for now it's working. So those are our two big systems that we use, but we really rely on systems, and we've set up some really good systems. This was my past year. In the past year, this has been my goal in the business has been to get better systems in place. So Opus was one, WhatsApp and one. We use Lesson Mate for doing makeup lessons, which has been huge for us. We don't offer any makeup lessons, and so Lesson Mate takes care of that, which is great. Um, we use Asana as a task manager for our admin staff. So we can give them tasks to do in there and track who's doing what. So those are kind of the big ones that we use. And so this has been the year of setting up those systems, and I need to continue to do more of that. But then I'm realizing as we're hiring so many people, we need to make sure they're actually following the systems. So that's now where I'm starting to hear and see that people aren't using the systems the way they need. They're kind of using their own system, which isn't great.
Right.
But now we've got to go back and like retrain or reemphasize, like, hey, I know you're using it this way, but we got to use it this way, because when five different people are using it and you do it on your own, then it kind of hoses the other four people, right? When they're trying to jump in
Yeah.
and help out. So that's another big thing that was not on my radar. I was like, oh, we're gonna have these systems and everyone's gonna use them, but they don't always remember to use them. So got to remind them.
What advice would you give to studio owners that are maybe thinking of bringing art, um, or even dance into their school, like as an additional product offering? Like without all the chaos, right? Without making all of the mistakes and reinventing the wheel. What advice would you give?
Uh, First, I'd say if you only offer music, if you can offer dance and or art, it's going to be huge. And quick story was you mentioned COVID, right? We all went through COVID, and COVID hit the Tuesday of at least the shutdown in California hit
Mhm.
the Tuesday of spring break of our spring break, and by Monday the following week we had everybody on Zoom, and we were up and running, right? So that was phenomenal for music lesson, and not phenomenal. It worked for music lessons. The sound quality was tricky, right, for a while, but it
Right.
worked. Um, for art, actually, it was great. And we had to. like I said, hustle to get some of the art stuff working on that. But we did for art, it was really great. We had our art teachers set up multiple cameras and multiple angles so they could, show the kids what they were doing. For dance, it was terrible, right? To have a kid dance in their own room and look at a screen and just look at the screen with the instructor and have the parents have. A lot of our kids are young, right? 4 or 5 year olds, and which they don't want as much screen time already, and they're getting from their school. Was really hard, but what we were able to do quickly was we had a patio outside this place we were renting, and we were able to bring dance back first because we could do it outside, and the cement patio had those little, squares already kind of pre-marked, right? The grooves in the square patios. And so those were your dance space. It was a 6 foot bubble, kind of thing. So dance was really awesome when we were able to bring it back outside. We couldn't bring private music lessons back outside, right? That there was a couple more weeks, maybe even months before we figured out how we could do the in-person inside with the temperatures and the screens and all that stuff. So it allows you diversity, which I think is so important in business, where if one thing isn't working for whatever reason, another thing can support it. And I'll go back to even opening our brick and mortar. We could have never opened that if we didn't have the infield schools like up and running and helping at the beginning to support, you know, all the money going out, right? All the red in that scenario. So I think, getting back to your question of like adding art or adding dance, a lot of music studios offer like private music lessons. And so group is always going to be more profitable. I feel like it can be a lot more work in certain and harder to get off the ground. You have one person that walks in and wants to take a private music lesson, you set them up with a private music lesson teacher and you're making money, right?
Right.
With a group class, you need like 4 or 5, right? And you need a bigger room and you need, right? So it's a little bit more, there's a little bit more setup involved in that. But when you've got 4 or 5 kids in a group lesson, if you price it right, you're making more money than 4 or 5 kids in private music lessons and way less to handle and manage. You're managing one teacher in one class, not 5 private music teachers and that thing. And if they're half-hour lessons for 5 private lessons, it's 2.5 hours as opposed to 1 hour in a group. So if you've got that space, you can book more, group classes in that. So I think, again, if you've got the physical space to do it, adding a dance or an art program is huge. And if you already have private music lessons or even group music and private lessons for music, getting those students, moving into art or into dance is pretty easy to do. Your marketing is, like I listen to a lot of marketing you talk about because you're brilliant at it. And your big thing is, what can I do for free, right? That doesn't cost me very little. And it is the students that are right in front of me, the parents that are right in front of me.
Yeah.
So you got a lobby full of parents and their kids, they might have siblings that aren't music isn't their thing, right? But maybe art and dance is. And so now you've got, it doesn't cost you anything to market to those families. We've noticed between 15 and 20% of our clientele do multiple modalities. So they're either doing art and dance or music and art or dance and music. But that's, you can figure like 20% of your clients without spending a dime, you just send an email out. If you have 100, private music students, it's pretty reasonable that 15 or 20 of either those or their siblings are ready to sign up for a dance class or an art class. So it's like right, it's right there. So that's
Yeah.
kind of been the easiest transition to get students in that. And then, one more thing I'll say about that is then our marketing doesn't really cost us much more. We just change the wording of our marketing. So, if you're putting out, um, yard signs. Instead of saying music lessons and the phone number, you're saying music lessons, dance classes, art classes, and the phone number. I'm not printing 3 times as many because I do art, music, and dance. They're just all on the same flyer, right? When we do our Facebook ad, we're doing a picture of an art student and a picture of a dance student and a picture of a music student. And we're saying, hey, do you have a budding artist, that wants to take music or art or dance? Sign up for a free class, right? That ad still costs us the same that if we were just doing music. So our offerings are, 3 times as much, but our marketing costs are very little, additional cost to adding those in there.
Yeah, no, that's so smart, so smart. So, if you're listening or watching this and thinking, "Man, I wonder if I should consider that." Well, it seems to me that to your point, Benji, like you already have these students paying you every single right, and so it's likely that at least 20% will probably try one of these other offerings that you can put out because you've already demonstrated that you are providing good value. And I think that's so important. Like Alex Hormozy talks about how brand is so important, and because what it does is it builds trust, and people, it's a reason why go to the pharmacy and there's like literally two different types of or two different names for the exact same medication. Well, what do most people choose? They choose the name brand
Yeah,
because why? Because they trust it,
yeah.
right? They trust it. And so you're already a trusted brand to those families. And so, it only stands to reason that if you were to offer something else, they will inherently trust that that product will be at least as good as the one they're already getting
Oh,
and enjoying.
yeah.
And
I mean,
so
I think it's
it's
also,
very smart.
I think it's one of those things where, um, advice on that would be make sure that your systems are the same, right? So you are, if you're monthly billing for music, be monthly billing for art, right? Be monthly billing for dance. We run everything through Opus, so we're not saying, oh, for art we have to put you in this system, and for dance we have to put you in this system. And we did that. We had a when we first brought dance in. We did it in a way where we rented a second location, and we had a dance. We had a woman who we were friends with who taught dance, and she wanted to move out of her dance studio. So we said, "Why don't you we'll rent a location, almost like a co-op. We'll rent a location, we'll run music out of the back, and you run dance." And we hired a front desk person who had to know two different systems. And when a parent came in, they had to register for dance and separately for music, different email. I mean, it was a mess. And that's actually how I got started with dance. She decided to move to Arizona and was like, "Do you want my 80 dance students in my dance program?" And we are like, "Yes, please." And so that's how, I mean, it kind of fell on our lap, to be honest.
Wow.
So that was very fortunate. But I think keeping those same systems in place so you're not having to train your customers again on something different. And then the other thing I'd say is having curriculum that you can dive into, that you can use, that you don't have to invent yourself if you're not comfortable with it. So I'm not Lauren and I are not dance teachers. So we licensed a program for our littles that gives it instant credibility, gives us a curriculum, gives us the music, all of that. Um, in the beginning so that it's much easier for us to get up and running. For art, we run a program called Art Fundamentals that we license out to other studios for the exact same reason. We've been doing art for so long that we know how to do it. And so when we were talking to other studio owners who were interested, oh, I'd love to do an art program, but I would know the first thing about starting art. I'm not an artist. I'm a music teacher. I don't know anything about art. I wouldn't even know how to do it. I'd have to hire a whole new art teacher, and I'd have to trust that they know what they were doing, that kind of thing. And so we're like, wow, this would be interesting because we've been doing it, know it for so long. What if we just packaged it and said, well, here it is? Because there's a lot of music programs that do them, Kids Rock, Keynotes, that do that same thing, which is brilliant. um, and it's so much less effort on your part as a studio owner, and there's so much profit in it that you're like, oh, I've already got the kids, I've already got the marketing, I've got the space, I just need the curriculum and the know-how. Like a bam, I need the mastermind behind it, the idea behind it.
Right.
So if you purchase that from another business that knows how to do that and implement it in your studio, you're just off and running. You don't have to go through the 20 years that we did to develop this and figure out what it looks like.
So, okay, so since you brought it up, so art fundamentals. This is a curriculum that you've developed that you guys curated over, like you said, the 20 years of being in this business, and you've created now a program like it's a art program in a box.
Yeah.
So they sign up with you, and you provide what? What do they get?
Sure. So the idea behind it is they're going to get the curriculum, and all this the supplies they can get from us, or they can get on their own. So there's a couple different avenues there, but basically what they're getting is they're getting the curriculum from us, they're getting all of the support from us on how to start an art program. So when they sign up with us, for example, Lauren will meet with them and she'll literally say, okay, take your Zoom, your phone, walk around your studio, tell me what your studio looks like. Let's talk about what room would work best, where you might need a little storage, how many kids you can get in that class, what you should charge compared to your other rates in your area. Do you have any competitors around that are also doing art classes? Probably not. So you can kind of charge whatever you want, right? There's probably not a lot of art programs going on, standalone ones, how you market it to your students. And then we've got all the curriculum for you. So the curriculum is set up in ages. So there's a 3 to 5, a 6 to 9, and a 10 to 14. We talk about having half-hour classes for an age group, 45 minutes for another age group, and 60 minutes for another age group. And this is all based on what we do at our studio. You can certainly adapt it to what works best, but this has been our success, and so we want to share that with them. Um, and then they get there's a weekly lesson plan that they have access to on a school page, and so they can download that lesson plan or put it up on a iPad or TV if they want, and it's a step by step directions with pictures and directions for each project. A lot of them are master artist based, so they are we're going to study Picasso this month, and we're going to learn a little bit. So there's an art history piece. We're going to learn about Picasso, and then we're going to do some artwork that looks like some Picasso artwork that they've done. They All of the supplies that we use are no mess, so you don't need an art studio. You don't need a sink. You don't need all this stuff that people normally think. Oh, I need a whole studio with a cement floor and hose it off with paint all over the walls. And we don't do any of that stuff. It's a no
Oh,
mess
wow.
clay. It's watercolors. Oil pastels, and then like drawing, cartooning, or collage. And then a lot of the stuff we try and form around like the art standards and what kids need. So for our younger kids, they do collage because we want to teach them cutting. A lot of kids don't know how to cut with scissors at 3 and 4 years old. I think that's a skill they need to learn. When they get later on, in older years, we work on concepts like shading and how does the sun and reflecting on an object give a certain shade, or color blending. This color and this color match together makes what color, kind of thing, the color wheel, those types of things. So there's an art education piece along with not just it's not an arts and crafts, it's a full on art curriculum program. And then for supplies, they can buy them through us, or we have a whole list. Each lesson plan says these are the supplies you need. We have a whole list of, hey, if you want to go to the dollar store and get it here, you want to get it online here, if you want to go to Michael's or whatever your local shop is. We try and keep our supplies as cheap as possible, the ones that we use and the ones that we ask that the studios go get, because we want the program to be as inexpensive as possible. Because the cheaper a program is, generally the more students you can get, and you can spread that out. So we don't want it to be something that's cost prohibitive for the studios to license from us or the students to take.
So how much is it for a studio to license your program?
Sure. So the initial startup is $14.99. So about $1,500 to get in. That gets you kind of the initial kit and onboarding. And we do
And the like, the coaching and
they get the
the
coaching, they get the
consultation and
one-on-one meeting. Yeah, they get all that stuff. We also have, once you've had your initial Zoom meeting, if you're, let's say David, you're the owner, so Lauren or I will get on and have an initial coaching call with you. We'll set all that up. Once you are like, yep, I'm in, let's get this program started. We talk about how long it'll take to, get students and get a waiting list and when you want to start that. And then depending on who's going to teach that, then we get back on another Zoom call with your teachers and walk through a lesson plan. We'll send you that initial price also includes supplies. So we're going to send you supplies for your first couple classes, along with some extra supplies, so your teachers can actually do the project themselves and see what that looks like, and ask any questions in that sense. And so you get this initial kit. We send some banners out that you can post in your lobby that say Art Fundamentals, that kind of stuff. So marketing, you get access to all of our marketing materials, the logo and everything that you can use. We've got a lot of Canva templates that you can just swap out our logo with your logo, our price with your price. So we've got all those resources that you get. And for this podcast, we can maybe post it later, but we can certainly do a discount. We usually do like like a 20% or 30% discount for your podcast listeners. So we can certainly do that. And then there's just a monthly fee, and that's for all the lesson plans. So the monthly fee is usually 149, and again, we usually do like a 20% discount for your podcast members. And so then it's just monthly for as long as you want to do it. We release the lesson plans in units, and so you get a unit is 3 months. So you'll get 3 months worth of lesson plans at once that you can download so you can prep everything that you want. Look at all the lesson plans. They're weekly and an extra one because there might be like a fifth. If you have class on Monday, there might be a fifth Monday that month. So there's always an extra lesson plan. So your teachers, we kind of put them in order of how we think they should be taught because they kind of expand on each other. Um, but somebody can jump in anytime and it doesn't have to be done in order. So if you look at 5 lesson plans in a month and go, oh, I want to do these four instead of like the extra one that Benji and Lauren put as extra, but you're like, oh, that extra one is awesome. You can do that one instead of one of the four. When we get around the holidays, we try and do some holiday ones. So they're very season specific when we introduce those, each unit, and then that allows you to go shopping for your materials or buy them from us if you want for a whole unit, to do that. And usually there's extras in there. So if kids join halfway through, you've got extra supplies for them.
So, okay, so let's say a school signs up, they get started, they go through your training, and then they start promoting this. And let's say 20% of their students sign up for it. I mean, what is the profit of something like this? Like for an average student that's maybe taking piano lessons and then they decide maybe a sibling signs up for this art program. What could a school owner charge per month?
So again, it's going to kind of depend on area. But what we relate it to is how many kids can you get into your room? Right, and how big do you want that class to be, because that's going to depend on your price too. So the younger kids, the 3 to 5, we say, you should really have no more than 6 kids. If you got 6 3-year-olds in a room with one teacher, like that's a lot. um,
Yeah.
so you don't want 8 or 10 or 15, but for the 12-year-old, like the 10 to 14-year-old class, if your room allows it, you could have 12, 14 kids in that class, right, if you got the space for it. So getting back to your mind, so we charge we do half hour, 45-minute and 60-minute classes. I want to say they're roughly around, let's say like 75, 85, and $95 a month for that 30, 45, and 50. So an hour class, it's $95 a month. Let's say you have, 4 classes a month. We pay our teachers, again, there's taxes on all that, but let's say a teacher costs us maybe $35 an hour. It's kind of a medium range for an art teacher pay in our area. So that is what, $140 a month if they're teaching 4 hours. And if we're charging $95 from that art student, then you get 2 students in there. There's $190. So you've covered your teacher. For our expenses, for art supplies, we usually say factor about $2.50 per class per student. So there's maybe another $10, per student that you've got to factor in as your supply cost. So you really have your supply cost and your teacher cost. So if you have 10 students in a class, right? You're making, that's almost $1,000 a month. You're paying your teacher $140 and you're paying maybe another $100 in supplies. So that's
Hmm.
$800 a month in profit,
Good margins.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for 10
Yeah. For a
students.
full class.
Yeah. So now you run, I mean, we have not all of our classes have that many students in there, but we're running probably this year just at our studio, we probably have 25 to 30 art classes a week like that running.
Wow.
So I mean, we probably, it's probably a good $150,000, program for us. And that's just at our studio, right? We also take this art program, and you can take the art fundamentalist program that we sell and you can apply it into the schools as well. So that's a whole nother, you know,
Oh,
business
interesting.
model to use
Yeah.
that same curriculum, adapt it a little bit, but bring it that same curriculum and bring it into the schools. We use the same curriculum, when we go into the schools and
S-
yeah, do that.
So you've got other schools doing this program right now.
Yes.
Are they finding success with this? Are they excited about having this program in their school?
Yeah, and so we started the idea just before COVID, and so COVID kind of wiped it all out. And then we started it again, and we hit a lot of snags of, how do we get them supplies, and what supplies do we use, and if they get their own supplies and the quality's not as good, then the program's not going to be as good, and then that reflects poorly on us, and they're not going to want to use the program. So we kind of went through a couple iterations of it. So this latest one is probably We call it like 1.0 or 2.0, sorry. It's been around probably 2 years. Um, and so we've developed a 3-year program. So the idea is that when the kids are in there from 3 to 5, and then 6 to 9, and then 10 to 14, that over 3 years, if they're in it for 3 years in that same age group, they will never do the same project again. And so then when they
Yeah.
move to the next age group, we've got another. So we've developed 2 years of curriculum because we're developing and refining this as we've used it. And then we're now under our third year of curriculum. So then next year, 2027, we'll start back with the first year again. So that'll be a really interesting time for us to review with those clients. Like, okay, now you're doing it for the first time again. What is that looking like? And we'll make some adjustments along the way. I think they've had a lot of good success with it. We've had 2 clients that have actually used it in the schools, like I'd said, and adapted it to that. So that's been great. There's been a lot of feedback, as with any kind of new, again, this is kind of new for us to do. There's been a lot of good
Yeah.
feedback for us on other, excuse me, things that we can offer. So one great idea that a client had of ours was uh, she wanted for her studio a progress sheet so that she could hand out to parents at the end of like a semester or a unit or a month, whatever they want to do. Of, hey, these are the skills that the kids are learning, and these, we're checking off the skills that they've learned, and here's the ones that we're going to learn next month or next year. And each one is customized to each student. So we designed one of those in Canva, and again gave that out to all of our clients. Hey, if you want to do this, you can do it whenever you want, how often you want to do it. Um, so those types of like feedback has been phenomenal for us to like just make the program even better and more inclusive. But yeah, we've gotten really positive feedback, on that, and been able to adapt as we needed to.
No, I think that's great. So for listeners that want to maybe get connected with you, how would they go about taking the next step and talking with you?
Yeah, so you can jump on artfundamentals.org. So it's just all spelled out. I won't spell it because I'll probably misspell it, but
Yeah, we can put it in the show
Okay,
notes.
perfect.org. And on there, you can see all the information on there. There'll be a application to fill out if you want, because we also want to make sure that's pretty exclusive in your area. So if there are other studios around you that you want to make sure don't offer this program in the future, you kind of block them out, and within a certain range. And then there's also a really cool calculator on there. So on this calculator on the website, you can put in, how many students you think you would get, what pricing, you want to put on, what how much you pay your teachers, and then it will spit out, if I have 6 kids and I'm going to charge $85 and I pay my teacher $30 a class and I have the supply cost of $2.50 per class, this is what I could make per month. And then you can just take that and multiply it times how many classes you want to offer. And we offer our program year round. So we don't take the summers off like music. We do art and music year round. Dance is a little bit different because they have kind of end of the year performances, and summer looks a little different for us. But art music we offer year round. So it's just month for our students. It's just month to month for as long as they want to
Mm.
continue. There's no long term contract. And again, we set up the art classes exactly the way we set up the music classes. It's a monthly fee. It's month to month. It's a 30-day cancellation policy. Those types of things. So yeah, so they go to
Yeah.
fundamentals.org and they can see, and they can kind of play with some numbers to see, what that would look like for them and what their costs would be and what they could possibly make.
Potentially make from it, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a great idea, and I think anyone with a customer list that's actively paying them, it's very smart to think, "What else can I sell?"
Yeah.
How can I expand my product menu? Because it's like we said, you have a built-in, marketing engine that's already working for you.
Yeah. You think of like
Um,
Target, right?
yeah,
When Target came around, Target just sold like stuff. They didn't have a pharmacy. They didn't have groceries, at least not all of them. Right. And now you go to Target to get groceries, to go to the pharmacy, to, get your eyes checked, to get all that stuff. It's like, it's great because it's all right here. Why do I have to go to 4 different places? Right. And that's what with offering art, music, and dance, why if they got 2 different kids and one likes art and one likes dance, I'm going to one place. It's super convenient for the parents.
absolutely. So as we take a step back now and sort of wrap things up, what would you say, Benji, just going back, if you could give your younger self, that 23, 24-year old, getting started in the industry as an educator, really as a business owner, like what advice would you give that young person?
There's a lot of advice. There was a lot I should have known or could have known, right? Because we just gained so much knowledge. I think the advice I would get, from a practical standpoint, I would say, make sure that you're forward thinking. Make sure you're putting systems in place and thinking, what does this look like when I have 100 students? I might have like 3 students now, and so I can do makeups whenever I want, and I can have a personal relationship with all these people, and I can, custom make everything to everybody's wishes. But when you have 100 students, you're not going to be able to do that. So I think definitely think scale, and that way you don't have to reinvent your systems when as you grow. And I feel like if you have really good systems at 100, you're going to have really good systems at 1,000, right? If you have bad systems at 100, you are going to be in serious trouble, at 1,000. So I think systems are huge. I wish I would have known more about systems. I wish Opus would have been around when I was starting out, systems like that. So kind of create a system, create an atmosphere that you want, a vibe of your studio, um, and so that would be my kind of practical advice. I think on a personal level, um, I think I would just say if you love what you do, you got to just leap into it. I think there's so many, as a coach of BAM, I come across a lot of people that are like, well, I have a daytime job and I do this on the side, and I'm trying to decide when do I make that leap, from like leaving my daytime job and, doing this full time. Um, and then I think there's 2 schools of thought on that. There is the, "Well, just leap, and if you don't have a backup plan, you're gonna scrounge and you're gonna work and you're gonna hustle, right, to make that work, if you don't have a plan B." That's a little bit more Benji. I think, I'm more type B. I think type A people might look at it as, "No, I have to have a backup plan, and I need to do this a little more methodically." I think there's value to both for sure. Um, and so I think having that combination, um, and figuring out where that balance is in your life and what you feel comfortable with. So if you feel comfortable leaping, then leap. If you feel comfortable, like maybe I'll, reduce my hours at my daytime job and go from full time to half, part time, but still keep that while I start this. So there's just a lot of, I think there's just a lot of ways to get up that mountain. And so um, don't look at other studios and go, "Oh, I have to do it that way." I think our model, and to be honest, came out of I won't say it was a mistake, but opening that studio and being so stressed about money and being trying to do so many hats, and I didn't even know what hats I even needed to do at the time. And then having that conversation with Lauren about, "Oh, maybe you should go into the schools and not have a brick and mortar." And that lasts us 10 years of our business. Um, and continues to, right? That still is a good model for us. And so I think trying to be innovative and not feel like, well, everybody just opens a studio and everybody goes into debt and everybody, has no students when they start. It doesn't have to be that way. So be creative in what you do, be committed in what you do. um, I think that's what would have given me a little fewer sleepless nights. I don't know if the path would have been any different, because sometimes you got to touch the fire and find out that it's hot, before you realize, maybe I shouldn't have touched the fire. You can't necessarily have somebody else tell you, right? You've got experience, and there's nothing like life experience. Um, but any of these ways that would give you a better night's sleep, I think would, yeah, if I could have given that advice, I would have been like, don't stress. It's all going to work out, right? Might not work out the way you think it's going to work out, but it's going to work out.
Benjie Kushins, thank you so much for sharing your story. And again, thank you for what you do for our industry and continue to do.
I
So
appreciate that.
appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Thanks for having me.